Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf, good morning from me as well. Let's get to it.
Social media now banned for under-16s in Australia. Could it pave the way for something similar here?
The crisis in maternity care laid bare. Women tell Sky News about their appalling experiences giving birth in the UK.
The NHS urges people to wear masks in public, saying the UK is facing a tidal wave of flu.
Also today, as Storm Bram batters the UK with 90-mile-an-hour gusts and amber weather warnings in place.
We'll hear from a campaigner who says the UK's flood defences aren't up to the job.
Hello, good morning. Well, Australian children under the age of 16 have just had their first day without social media. It's after the country's ban came into effect. So the Australian government argues the move protects young people, and companies who don't comply now face some pretty hefty fines.
The Prime Minister told teenagers they should start a sport, learn an instrument or read a book. Well, could it happen here as well? There are no current plans for a ban. The UK government says it's important children are able to benefit safely from the digital world. But here is Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
This is indeed a proud day to be Australian, because make no mistake, this reform will change lives for Australian kids and allowing them to just have their childhood, for Australian parents enabling them to have greater peace of mind, but also for the global community who are looking at Australia and saying, well, if Australia can do it, why can't we?
Well, Nicole Johnson is in Sydney for us. Nicole, I can see you surrounded by people. What's the reaction been?
Well, let's find out. It's been a huge day for Australian parents and kids, their first day off social media apps officially, but it seems that a lot of kids are finding a way around it. What do you think, Felix? How's it affecting you?
Yeah, everyone's already got around it, so it's not really affecting me because I don't really have social media,
So how are kids getting around it? What are your friends doing?
VPNs, parents' IDs, all of that, yeah.
And do you think the ban is a good idea or a bad idea?
Terrible idea.
Why?
Because it blocks us from communicating, because we actually use most of those apps to communicate. They're not actually banning the things that need to be banned. Yeah, it's just not a good idea.
But you can use other apps to communicate. Can't you just switch to those so that you're not on the more addictive ones like TikTok and Instagram?
Yeah, I guess, except it's already hard because we already have like all our messages on the other apps. We don't really have any like before presence on those apps, so we're just like starting from scratch.
You're used to it. Tom, what do you think? Are you on social media?
I'm not really on social media, but I don't really feel like the ban is going to work.
Why not?
Again, everybody's just getting around it. It's not really effective. It's more of a temporary inconvenience than a ban.
And this has been one of the big concerns of the Australian government, the fact that its rollout is quite patchy. They have said that they acknowledge that it could be difficult for this ban to actually work, but regardless, the government says that it needs to try. Now, from a parent's perspective, you've just heard from these kids, they don't seem to be suffering.
Yeah, it's a bit worrying, but I do think it's reasonable that the government is trying to step up and working with the industry, which has really resisted any kind of regulation. The platforms are really opaque. It's not clear what data they're collecting about kids, what content they're seeing and so on. So I actually feel it's really good that they're trying to do something to offset the harms that are happening at a societal level.
We're heading into the Australian summer holidays. It seems that the kids will be spending, or some of them at least, less time on the apps. How will that make things different over the holiday period? You're going to have to spend more time entertaining them, perhaps.
Yes, that's going to be a challenge, but we're trying to get the kids to entertain us.
The Prime Minister has said to kids, you need to read more books, perhaps, or learn an instrument instead of being on the apps. What would you say to Australia's Prime Minister after he's given you all that advice? Kobe?
I'm not really sure, but...
Do you think you'll read more books?
Not at all.
No? Not your thing?
Not really.
Are you going to miss some of these apps?
Definitely.
Which ones?
Snapchat and TikTok.
And what did you think when you first heard that you would be banned from it? Were you shocked?
Yeah, I was really shocked because, yeah.
Could it be good, though, to grow up without it for the next few years, to have more space to think and to go outside?
Definitely. But, like, it's still... Sometimes you're at home, you just need social media when you're bored.
To relax?
To relax, yeah.
And what about you? How are you feeling about it?
I haven't been banned from anything, so I'm pretty okay with it.
You've also found a way around it?
Yeah.
And, Dad, what do you think?
I think it's a good idea. I've got younger kids, so hopefully it keeps this next generation off their apps and they don't develop any addiction to start with.
Have you noticed your kids having any addiction so far, or they're not on it?
They like using iPads and stuff like that, but no, not social media apps at the moment.
So it is a pretty extraordinary development for the Australian government to take this action. They've been preparing for it for months. It isn't as though the switch was just turned off overnight, though. The social media companies have been taking these kids, or some of them at least, off the apps over the last couple of weeks. In the schools, some schools have been trying to prepare students for it. I've heard of some kids being quite emotional over the last couple of days about it. But the message from the government and from a lot of parents is that they do believe it's harmful. They think it's addictive. There's been some really high-profile cases here in Australia of children taking their own lives after severe online and cyber bullying. And that is why the government and the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has said that they needed to step in and take this action. Now, Australia also knows that the rest of the world is watching this, from Denmark, Malaysia, Indonesia, New Zealand. These are some of the countries that have said that they're looking into Australia's legislation to see whether it works, whether this ban can actually be successful, to decide whether they'll try and do something similar.
Nicole, this has been such fantastic coverage. I wonder, by the way, had you asked, particularly the way the Ashes is going, some of the kids, if they'd embrace more time to play cricket as opposed to reading, they might have said yes. But I had a slightly more boring quick question, which is obviously Prime Minister Albanese's from the Labour Party. It's a slightly different political split there than it is here. But is this something that all political parties have supported, or is there a sort of free speech division over it? Because I thought it was quite interesting that pretty much all of the parents you just spoke to there seemed behind it.
Yeah, I mean, there is division in the country about it. Overwhelmingly, the message you seem to get is, as we heard, is that parents are behind it. From both sides of the political divide, there seems to be a lot of support for it, but some of the more fringe parties, such as the Libertarians, they've spoken out against it. They're saying that the state shouldn't be intervening in this, that it should really be up to parents to decide what sort of access their children should have to social media. So it's not an across-the-board situation where everyone is behind it. But the message you seem to get from the parents is that they do support it.
Nicole, thank you so much. Great to hear the reflections of, well, the kids.
Are you going to read more books?
It was brilliant.
Nah.
Also, how are you feeling about it? Don't really care because I've already got round it. Absolutely
well, clearly
incredible.
They need to tighten up how they're implementing it.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is from a parent perspective, even if we just accept that there are going to be a lot of kids who just get around with this, right? You know, that's just reality of what's happening. It's a good tool in your arsenal to try and stop your child not being on social media. If you say, I'm really sorry, it's banned until you're 16, so you can't do it.
And the gentleman at the back made a good point on that, you know, it's going to be hard for kids that are used to using it and have all the friends connections and the messages that the tall boy was talking about. But yeah, for a new generation, if they don't get hooked, you know, it's going to be different.
Very, very interesting.
Now, it's flu season here, and the NHS is warning that it's come earlier and hit harder than before. The health service is urging people to wear face coverings on public transport to try and stop the spread of flu.
Now, the chief executive of NHS Providers, which represents NHS Trust, said that we're facing a very nasty strain of flu that's hit earlier in the year than normal. And he also said that people who are coughing and sneezing should wear face coverings on public transport, just like during COVID. Well, Molly's here. She's also not very well.
The irony.
Where's your mask?
I'm better now. Thankfully, I'm better now. It's just a cold, not the flu, I hope. I told you it was flu to make you feel sorry for me. No, it's probably stuff you think you hear every year, right? You know, it's come earlier than usual, you know, a tidal wave of flu. But actually, NHS providers are saying that they're in unprecedented and uncharted territory, which is why they're saying we should be wearing a mask, like you say, like during COVID. They've said we need to go back into the habit that if you're coughing and sneezing, but you're not unwell enough to not go to work, not me, then you must wear a mask when you're in public spaces, including on public transport, to stop the chances of you giving your virus to somebody else. So that's from the Chief Executive of NHS Providers, which is the body that represents NHS Trust. We do have particularly high levels this year. 1,717 people were in flu beds in England last week, which is 50% higher than on the same point last year. And we're still actually, as they say, not at the kind of peak winter levels because we expect it to rise again in the run-up to Christmas. But Number 10 Downing Street saying is sort of long-standing advice, really. They've sort of said this is neither new nor an instruction, but simply something people can consider when trying to limit the spread of winter respiratory illnesses. The best defence against flu is the vaccine, which is why we're ramping up our vaccination efforts this winter with almost 17 million flu jabs already delivered. So people can take their flu jabs. I've not had mine. If you guys have gone to your pharmacy?
No.
So take it is the advice. Do it. Yeah, you know, we know the people that it's available for, but yeah, they're saying take it. It is quite a serious matter this year.
I think, though, it's really important just to dwell on, because I saw this headline cross yesterday, and I think I'm right in saying it came from, as you said, the Chief Executive of NHS Providers, which represents Trust. This isn't from Sir Jim Mackey, the Chief Executive of the NHS.
No.
And I think it came out during an interview he was giving, as opposed to it being sort of official policy.
Yeah.
And I think just going back to that government statement, it's important to reflect on that. This is neither new nor an instruction, because it is quite triggering, to be honest.
Yeah,
when you suddenly
it's haunting, isn't it? When you think back to
it takes you back.
Yeah.
And I think that's really crucial to highlight. This isn't an official new dictum from the government.
Although the UK Health Security Agency also posted last week saying that they would encourage people, if they're coughing and sneezing, to wear on public transport. So it's kind of like we're not there yet, but there are official bodies pointing to...
But I guess that would be sort of advice we might have all got 10 years ago as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, don't sneeze on someone at work.
Yeah.
OK, great. But when you see people say you should wear a mask and it's come from the NHS, I was suddenly taken aback.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to say it's not, because there might be a time in the future where this sort of thing is really, really mandated and needed again. And I think they've got to be very careful about not misusing people's willingness to follow rules in that regard. Really interesting. Great stuff, Molly. Thank you. Hope you feel better. Don't sneeze on us in the meantime. Now, international talks on how the European Court of Human Rights handles migration cases begin today. The Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, will address an informal conference in Strasbourg, and he's calling for a modernisation in the way illegal migration is dealt with. So, Rob's here to explain. Rob, what's going on?
So, yeah, as you say, an informal gathering of ministers from Council of Europe states, sort of not the same thing as the EU, but kind of related broadly, those sort of countries, meeting up in Strasbourg to basically discuss how the European Convention on Human Rights cannot be changed, but how the interpretation of it can basically be modernised because of some of the political tensions we've seen in countries, including the UK, but not just the UK, regarding how it basically affects migration cases, predominantly how it can get in the way of people being deported. I think Sir Keir Starmer is trying to kind of cast the UK as at the helm of this modernisation. He's written a piece in The Guardian today alongside the Danish Prime Minister. You remember a lot of the reforms that we're getting to illegal migration are based in part on what's going on in Denmark, where he's talked about basically how elements of the sort of international order that govern migration and asylum are outdated. They're for a different age. They're not for an age where you have the mass mobility of now, where people can move about a lot more easily. And he says, as a result, if parties like Labour don't act to change this, then you get something more sinister that comes along. So we'll get that discussion today. I don't think we'll get necessarily anything instantly out of it, but I think it's significant that, for a start, you've got Labour Prime Minister, an ex-human rights lawyer, talking about this, but also that this meeting was initiated by the Council of Europe, by the body that runs the European Court of Human Rights and looks after the ECHR. So there's clearly a recognition there in Strasbourg, probably not just because of what's happening in the UK, but what's happening around Europe, that certain elements need to be changed and modernised.
I'm not in any way an expert on this, but there's always the sort of different parts, and some people suggest the right to family life part might be easier to reform within the ECHR versus the kind of any possible risk of harm if you return to your original country is very hard to disapply. So it'll be really interesting to see where this goes, and it's a complicated one. I have to say, as I pause on this, I was thinking, gosh, poor old David Lammy. He gets all of the tough, like almost unwinnable briefs now. It's amazing how much falls under his brief in terms of some of the, on the surface, very tricky things to solve.
Yeah, I think this is, I'd assume anyway, this is under his Deputy
Justice.
Prime Minister hat, maybe, or it could be Justice.
Yeah, but I mean,
sure,
again, it's odd that it's not Home Secretary. Really.
Yeah, the Attorney General's over there as well. On the kind of Article 3, Article 8, which bits thing, there has already been... I think a lot of the focus for what the UK will want to focus on is the Article 3 stuff, which is basically risk of inhumane treatment and torture. The Article 8 family life stuff, they've already tried to reform by issuing guidance in the UK about how courts interpret it. The difficulty with Article 3 is it's absolute. You can't sort of trade it off against other rights. So they have always said we need other European countries to be on board with this. And there's talk of a sort of political declaration coming from Council of Europe member states, which I guess just gives governments around the continent cover to maybe push it a little bit more if they know that there's a political declaration coming from Strasbourg that's been issued and they won't be subject to a challenge in the Strasbourg court.
It's so funny how we've all kind of become experts in these kind of like legal parts of treaties and all rights conventions and stuff like that. And I guess the reason is because these are the specific things that are directly linked to small boats, to appeals, and it's kind of important to kind of bring it back to that.
When you look at what Trump has been saying as well, that's the fascinating context in the last few days, accusing Europe of decaying. You know, does that add added impetus for European leaders to act?
I was pleased Rob was the expert there and remembered which articles we were talking about, which I was sort of loosely alluding to. We've had the Rob Powell rule of foreign policy this week. We've had his expertise on trains.
So exactly.
It's broad.
So it's very broad.
Broad and deep.
Broad and deep, yeah, exactly. Rob thanks as always. Now, Storm Bram has lashed parts of the UK with 90-mile-an-hour winds. Thousands of homes have been left without power, and it's also causing commuter chaos as well. We can have a look now at some of the impact.
Well, residents along the riverside in York have been advised to take immediate action to protect themselves and their properties due to flooding from the River Ouse. God, I should know the pronunciation of that. What is that? Ouse. Oh, OK, not too far off. My apologies to residents of York. The storm led this hair-raising abandoned landing at Bristol Airport with the strong winds clearly shaking the plane there. Meanwhile, there were 91 flight cancellations at Dublin Airport. Further disruptions to flights and trains are expected today.
People in Scotland as well are warned to brace for more high winds today. Yellow warnings have been in place until this evening for the Shetland Isles, the north of Scotland, central and Edinburgh and Glasgow. Gusts of up to 90 miles an hour expected as well in the northwest Highlands. So some serious weather conditions going on. Stay safe. Let us know how it is in your area as well. Mornings at sky.uk. Well, we've been talking an awful lot about what is going on in Australia, where they've decided to ban social media for under 16s. It's all part, I guess, of this increased look in how our young people are doing. Are they OK? You know, what is this multi-online generation getting up to? How are they feeling? How are they coping? And also what the future looks like for them. Joining us now to discuss some of these issues, I'm pleased to say, is the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy. Great to have you on the programme.
Thanks for having me.
So Australia banned social media for under 16s. Is this something that we're watching, that we're considering?
We're obviously keeping a very close eye on the way that this is playing out in Australia, because we know that young people are really struggling with the amount of time that they spend online and what is happening to them online. Through the work that we've done, that we're publishing today, the State of the Nation report about what it's like to grow up in this country in 2025, we've found serious concerns from both boys and girls about the places and spaces that used to exist in the real world having disappeared. They've retreated into their bedrooms and spend a lot of time alone online. Girls reporting that they're being targeted with explicit images, boys reporting that they're being targeted by influencers with negative attitudes towards women and girls, and we know that the action is needed. That's why we're putting £500 million behind a new generation of youth clubs, youth workers, so that every young person in this country has an adult in the real world who they trust, who they can talk to, who can help them to navigate these challenges, places to go and meaningful things to do with their lives.
I know how important the kind of youth club thing is and how important it is for communities. But you just outlined a massive problem that we know about. And you've spoken about it as well. You know, you've spoken about the addictive nature of algorithms in particular, which I think is a huge issue, and what it's doing to young people. Don't we need to be a bit more ambitious, like Australia, in blocking social media?
Well, like I said, we're watching what is happening in Australia.
Are we considering it, though? Because it's one thing to watch it. Everyone's watching it. I'm watching it. Elon Musk is watching it. Doesn't mean he agrees with it. Are we considering it?
Well, we have looked at this very closely during the course of the last 12 months because we've been surveying young people. We've had the biggest conversation government has ever had with young people. 14,000 young people took part in this process. And what we've found was serious concerns amongst them about enforceability. Are we seriously saying we're going to start prosecuting young people for looking at social media?
But that's not what they're doing in Australia. The onus and the prosecution is on the companies, not on kids and parents.
Yeah, and that's the approach that we've taken here in the UK, in that we've introduced new laws, the Online Safety Act, which is
but it's totally
putting the onus.
Well, because when in the UK, you're 15.
I'm really trying to answer your question because I think this is so important to people at home. The Online Safety Act takes a similar approach, but it is a different piece of legislation. What it does is say to social media providers that they are responsible for content on their platforms that is harmful or abusive, and they need to take that down. Now, the challenge we've got as a government is to make sure that that is properly enforced. But on the separate question of whether we ban young people from using social media, there are also concerns that taking that sort of approach will push young people to other places and spaces. And what we heard most of all from young girls who took part in this State of the Nation report was that they were concerned that if boys in particular couldn't see that there was a problem with behaviours online, they wouldn't be able to see that there was a problem with those behaviours in the real world. What they asked for, above all else, was adults who they could trust, who they could go to and turn to, who had the information, the skills that they needed to be able to help young people to navigate this online world.
Because just listen to what you're saying and listen to what government's been saying. You're not considering this, are you? You're not considering...
We're not planning to introduce this.
And I just
it
think
doesn't mean that we've closed our minds to further action.
Because I just think it goes alongside the fact that you haven't decided to ban phones in schools as well. You know, is this the government that is a bit soft when it comes to the digital sphere?
No, we're operating in the real world, and this is the first strategy that this country has had for young people since before the iPhone was invented. We're putting £500 million behind it, but we're taking the world as it is. We've got young people who are online. They've grown up entirely as an online generation for the first time, and they are not only the most connected generation in history, but they're also the most isolated. That is the stark challenge that we're having to confront. So giving every young person in this country places to go, things to do, and people who they trust who can help them to navigate the complexities of growing up today is, I believe, the right approach.
Can I ask you about comments that President Trump made overnight about the London mayor? He said he's a horrible mayor. He's an incompetent mayor. He's a horrible, vicious, disgusting mayor. I think he's done a terrible job. I mean, is Sadiq Khan living rent-free in President Trump's head?
I mean, I strongly disagree with those comments. I think Sadiq is doing a really good job, and has been at the forefront of providing affordable housing, improvements to transport in London. You know, I say this as somebody who lives in the north of England. We would love to have some of the transport infrastructure that Sadiq has overseen. He's dealing with, you know, he's been one of the people who has set up multi-agency approaches to help young people with knife crime, gang violence that we're learning from in government. So I strongly disagree. Yes, he is. Yes.
Why haven't we heard anything from Keir Starmer on it, or have I missed it? Has he said anything to defend Sadiq Khan?
Well, I'm sure that he would, because Sadiq is doing a really good job.
I'm just asking...
And we work very closely with him, and we learn from some of the things that he's been doing in London. So I know the Prime Minister would disagree with those comments.
The reason I ask is because, you know, these are quite punchy comments about someone, right? Horrible, vicious, disgusting. You wouldn't expect to see something from the Prime Minister, wouldn't you?
Well, I'm sure that if you asked the Prime Minister if he was sitting in this studio today, he would say what I've said, which is that Sadiq is doing an incredibly good job for London. We're proud of our mayors, and we're proud of the fact that this government has handed more power to mayors and councils than any other, and will continue to do so, because you've got different approaches being taken in different parts of the country, and that is the right thing to deliver for people, whether you live in London, wherever you live in this country. We're seeing some amazing work and innovation.
Just finally, Baroness Longfield is taking over as chair of the grooming gangs inquiry. I knew her work as Children's Commissioner. She's obviously got a kind of long history working with children, but there are concerns about the fact that she was a Labour peer, right? I just want to read the words of Fiona Goddard. This is the victim. She was abused by a gang in Bradford while she was living in a children's home. And she said the fact they've chosen someone so closely connected with the Labour government raises serious concerns over how impartial and independent this inquiry will be. I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it, to go forward with an inquiry unless it has the confidence of the victims?
Well, I've known Anne Longfield for over 20 years. I first came across her when I was working at the Children's Society more than 20 years ago, and she is a fierce advocate for children and young people. She's made herself deeply unpopular at times because she speaks truth to power. I think she's the right person, but I really recognise not just what Fiona Goddard's just said, but what a lot of survivors of grooming gangs feel. They've been let down repeatedly by people in positions of power, and their trust has to be earned. But I'm confident that Anne Longfield is the right person to do that.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Lisa Nandy, speaking to us there. Thank you.
And the topic of how to address social media, particularly for young people, that Sophie was discussing there with the Culture Secretary, will continue to lead a lot of the show today, as it's seen Australia introduce a ban on under-16s. And coming up next, we're going to be speaking to a mum from Sydney who's in favour of the move after her son, Ollie, tragically took his own life after being bullied online. That interview coming up next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News. Is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Welcome back. Let's get the news this morning, shall we? A new world for Australian teens to navigate as Australia bans children under the age of 16 from using social media. So the law is designed to try and protect youngsters from potential mental health risks, cyberbullying and also inappropriate content.
A warning to those with flu symptoms that they should wear a mask in public spaces to tackle what's being described as a tidal wave of flu. The chief executive of NHS Providers, which represents NHS Trust, says we're facing a very nasty strain that has struck earlier in the year than normal.
The spending watchdog has ruled the UK's current asylum processes are flawed and they're also wasting taxpayers' money. The National Audit Office estimates in the last year nearly £5 billion was spent on asylum, with nearly half of that total on hotels.
Now, staying with our top story this morning, Australians under the age of 16 have now lost access to their social media. It's the first ban of its kind ever in the world, and it covers 10 platforms that include Facebook, Instagram and TikTok.
Well, our next guest is someone who is in favour of the move after her son, Ollie, took his own life after he was bullied online. Mia Bannister, founder of Ollie's Echo, joins us live from Sydney. Great to have you on the programme. Thank you for speaking to us. We really appreciate it. Just give us, initially, what are your reflections on the ban? You're in favour of it?
Oh, I'm absolutely in favour of it. Today has been very bittersweet. I'd do anything to have my child, Ollie, here with me today, every day, but unfortunately, due to online bullying and algorithms that fueled an eating disorder, I lost my child. And, you know, it's bittersweet, but I'm very proud to be an Australian because I believe, you know, we are leading the world here and we will save lives with this legislation.
We're so grateful, Mia, for you joining us today and sharing your story. Could you elaborate a little bit for us? I understand if you don't want to. I mean, how old was Ollie? And
Of course. Ollie was 14 years of age. He was the most beautiful, beautiful child. He had this mop of red curly hair that people would die for. He was very empathetic and a kind soul. He was my world. He was my only child. And, you know, the silence in my home now is absolutely deafening without him. So
it honestly breaks your heart. We're looking at pictures of him now, and I can see what you mean with that mop of hair. You mentioned
it was beautiful.
You mentioned that algorithms fueled his eating disorder, and I just thought that was such an important point. That he obviously had this vulnerability, this insecurity already, and you believe the social media companies and the platforms effectively preyed on that, I guess.
Oh, absolutely they did. Ollie's story is so multifaceted, down to, unfortunately, an absent parent who wasn't there for him and ostracised him, which I believe was the trigger for the anorexia. And then social media, of course, like most teens looking for connection, they go to social media. And Ollie was being fed information on, you know, macronutrients, only eating his maintenance calories. Now, it didn't matter what his doctor or myself told him that his maintenance calories weren't enough. In his head, maintenance calories were going to keep him going, and he was weighing every ounce of food. Even if I got him to eat maybe some Macca's fries, he would still pour those out onto the scales and weigh them, So the kitchen scales became his best friend. And just looking up content, even recipes and things like that were high in protein, cooking them and then not eating them. So he was absolutely fed this, protein powders. Also, all of a sudden wanting to join the gym. Now, Ollie wasn't a sporty kid, but all of a sudden I'd walk into his bedroom and he'd be, lifting my kettlebells and doing push-ups. So, yeah.
Mia, at the top of the programme, we spoke to some kids in Sydney, and one aspect was that clearly in the short term, it seems they've been able to get around the ban, and that's a question, I guess, for implementation in the weeks and months ahead. But they were also quite clearly against the ban. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised by that, but what would be your message to them to convince them that this is a good thing for Australia and a good thing for children?
The problem is we've handed them phones and devices, and it's an addiction. So these children are addicted. And my beautiful friend Emma Mason, who you will know spoke in the UN recently, she calls it social heroin, and that is exactly what it is. So look, there will be issues getting them off these platforms, and I say short-term pain, long-term gain. It's not healthy for them. It's proven that they're the loneliest generation, even though we're supposed to be more connected. They're not connected. They're not real relationships online. So I say to kids, get out and be kids. Talk face-to-face, get your childhood back, because they don't have the childhoods that we once had.
We spoke to the Culture Secretary a short time ago, who said that in the UK they are looking, they're watching what happens in Australia, but she did also say that they were not currently planning on bringing in a similar ban. I just wondered what your message is to other governments around the world who may be watching this but perhaps reluctant to take a similar step.
It's disappointing to hear that other governments, aren't looking at enforcing similar legislation. I think if we all stand together, united, we will make a hole in the bottom line of those big tech giants. At the moment, you've got parents sitting across the kitchen table fighting multi-billion-dollar algorithms with their kids. This legislation gives us guardrails to say to our children, it's not forever, it's just not yet. It's no different to seatbelt laws, to drinking, gambling rules. We put guardrails around these things for a reason, to protect our children. So for me, I think governments need to come on board, because together that's how we enact change.
Mia, thanks so much for joining us and for sharing your story. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Mia Bannister there joining us from Australia, and more on that story as well throughout the programme. Now, we've been talking all week about the crisis in maternity care. The report by Baroness Amos yesterday was utterly damning, with stories of women being ignored, filthy wards, and most heartbreaking of all, avoidable baby deaths. Today, the state of the services across the country will once again be laid bare when annual data is released from the Care Quality Commission later this morning.
So the state of maternity care in this country is a story that on this programme we are not going to just do once and then forget about. We're going to keep going. And after our reporting yesterday, we've been frankly overwhelmed by stories from you about the appalling care you've experienced. We just wanted to take a moment and reflect on some of those stories. These are voiced by producers.
I was sick up to 30 to 36 times a day. I couldn't function, but I was never believed. I was told everybody gets sick in pregnancy. Even when I was laying on a toilet floor in A&E for 6 hours, unable to get up, they still didn't believe me.
I nearly lost my baby due to doctors not listening to me. I was sent home at 6 a.m. with contractions that were 3 minutes apart. The doctor was rude and discharged me. I drove home while in labour.
My midwife told me to stop making noise and refused to give me gas and air. No one came to check on me for over an hour, and I was on my own and terrified with my first baby.
Many of you have been getting in touch with us directly here on Mornings with Ridge and Frost. And if you'd like to send your own story in, please do. mornings@sky.uk.
The thing that's really struck me listening to the stories that you shared and also reading the report by Baroness Amos is not just maternity as a whole, but it's specifically how we deal with baby loss and miscarriage, stillbirth. And honestly, the lack of humanity and compassion in some cases is pretty breathtaking. So we wanted to share with you the story of one of our viewers. This is Sina. If you do one thing today, watch this video.
I had been on a ward post-procedure of removing the remains of our past baby, along with lots of new mums and their newborns, and that just felt absolutely horrifying to have to try and hide my tears. Similarly, the midwife coming up to my bedside to congratulate me on my pregnancy, even though I clearly passed the baby. And then there were the subsequent phone calls asking me why I hadn't showed up to scans in the following weeks, even though I'd miscarried in that same hospital, as well as numerous letters asking me why I'd missed appointments, again, from the same hospital. They didn't connect the dots. They didn't think that it could be an issue even. It should have been flagged and I should have been allowed time to grieve. And they didn't even offer any sort of bereavement condolences or a service or anything that might have helped me cope better.
Well, Sina, thank you for sharing your story. Again, thank you to everyone who has. And as we've been discussing for the last couple of days, it's been really shocking, the number of people that have come forward with these experiences. And I guess the question, Sophie, is Wes Streeting watching? Is it reaching him? I'm sure he'd say it is, and he's already, triggered this Baroness Amos review, and it's moving forward, as these reviews go, relatively quickly. But we've got to wait until April, till May for the final reports.
I think this is it, and I think this is what's kind of exasperating for those of us who've kind of covered the maternity story for many years now. Is that this is not a surprise.
No.
We've had 750 recommendations over the last decade from multiple reports, as you say, Wilf. What is going to be different this time? And I think the difficulty is that yes, some of this is specific recommendations and funding, but it's also, I would say, a cultural problem. And we heard that from Sina there. It's a humanity issue, particularly, I would say, in how we're dealing with women who've lost a child.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. And more will come on this programme, as Sophie said, on this topic. Please do continue to bravely share your stories with us. Now, research has shown people from ethnic minorities are less likely to gamble than their white counterparts. But when they do gamble, they're likely to suffer harm and not seek help. It's raised questions on whether current support is reaching everybody who needs it.
Well, Sky's Emma Birchley spoke to Kiki Marriott, who was trapped in a cycle of addiction, and she was shocked to be the only black woman in the room during recovery.
On a dark December morning 2 years ago, Kiki Marriott left her flat in southeast London as the city slept and started walking.
I was numb at that point. I was just so done with trying to survive.
Kiki was trapped in a cycle of addiction, gambling all hours, taking cocaine for the maximum buzz. But that morning, instead of taking her own life, she decided to seek help. Yet what she would find on that journey of recovery would shock her.
I just realised that there wasn't anybody that looked like me or sounded like me. And it got me to thinking, well, I can't be the only black woman suffering with a gambling or cocaine addiction.
Lots of research has been done showing that people from ethnic minority backgrounds are less likely to gamble than their white counterparts, but more likely to suffer harm from that gambling. And the reports have also shown that they're less likely to seek help for the problem. And each of the reports says that more should be done to raise awareness, that support is out there for everyone. But it seems the message isn't getting through, or something is stopping them.
Well, Emma's here to discuss this further. Emma, I mean, what services, whether it's public or private, are available to people who feel they're getting addicted in a bad way to gambling? And I guess, how does that then, I mean, your assessment of having done this, why are some more readily kind of embracing those services than others?
So the service is the same, whatever colour you are, whatever gender you are, whatever age you are. And there are charities. Kiki rang the National Gambling Helpline that day when she got home, when she made a decision, that catalyst, that moment when she made a decision to change her life, and it set her on a path of support groups. She went into rehab for 6 weeks. So that's out there. The question here is, why is it that it seems people from ethnic minorities are less likely to go and seek that help? Now, if you talk to Kiki, she's very clear that there is shame, there is stigma, there's a cultural element at play, that you keep your business to yourself behind closed doors. But actually, during the research for this piece, speaking to different people, another angle to this is actually that there is mistrust of statutory services. We've heard that, haven't we, with the maternity story we've been talking about, that maybe people from black backgrounds, for some reason, don't have the same experience. And that puts them off. Sense of having had bad experiences, for example, when they went to the doctor. So all of that is at play. But I think with this story, what's so powerful is Kiki's journey. She's quite amazing, really. It was 2 years ago she was standing at that railway station about to make a very different decision. The train was late, she went home, and she decided to seek help. She phoned the gambling helpline that set her on this path. But as she said to me, I thought of people who were gambling addicts as being white old men in the bookies. They weren't people that looked like me. When she looked it up online, they weren't people who looked like her. And why was that? Now, interestingly, as she was leaving rehab after 6 weeks, she was in the taxi, her phone rang, and it was a woman called Lisa Walker. Now, I met Lisa 3 years ago, a white woman, about my age, lost £127,000 that she'd won on the poker, ended up homeless with her young children. And 3 years ago, when she was talking to me, she was saying, why were there no women? Why, when I went to recover, were there 35 men and one other woman? And so she set up these support groups very specifically for women. So Kiki's had support there. And of the nearly 250 women that Lisa has helped, only 4 have been anything but white, and one of those was Kiki. So you can see that there's something afoot here, and it's about what Kiki wants to do now from this really negative place is actually say, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be, like Lisa has been, be a voice that you can reach out to. And when you watch the piece, actually you go from this very negative place to a really positive place, because she is now not only attending the support groups, which she will need to do forever. She is in recovery forever, just like Lisa is, for gambling addiction, but also cocaine addiction. But she's also running her own groups, and she wants that to be her job. So I think just as Lisa has made this difference, that's what Kiki wants to do now.
Emma, it's a really, really interesting take on it, and well worth watching the full report, and we'll discuss this again later on in the programme. Thanks so much.
I should say, if you have been affected by the story, you can contact the Samaritans on 116 123 or by emailing joe@samaritans.org, and you can also reach out to the National Gambling Helpline. That's 0808 8020 133 and gamcare.org.uk.
We're going to take a break here. When we come back, could the Great British Pub be in danger after the recent budget measures? We'll be talking to the British Beer and Pub Association next.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding.
It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
British pubs and brewers are preparing to host what they're calling an emergency summit as they brace to absorb more financial pressure from new business rates that were announced in the budget.
So the British Beer and Pub Association is warning the changes will add £160 million a year to the industry's rates at a time when staff wages and rising energy costs are already creating headaches.
Well, we're joined now by Emma McClarkin, the Chief Executive of the British Beer and Pub Association. Thanks so much for joining us. Very, very good morning to you. Just quickly recap what happened in the budget, because there was some framing of it that suggested business rates were coming down, but there'd previously been a hiatus on some of those business rates. So for many of your pubs that you represent, business rates are going up. They're kind of coming back to where they used to be.
Well, this budget was trailed as the big reset to support our pubs. It was going to inject fairness into business rates, but what we've actually seen is a budget of smoke and mirrors that has left many publicans very distressed up and down the country, wondering how they'll pay increased bills. So bills will not be going down. 4,000 pubs will be paying rates for the first time. And we know that, on average, bills have gone up by 63% versus only 7% for online retail giants. So we're asking for the government to review this to make sure that we get a multiplier that actually supports our pubs and gives them the promises that they were made.
I guess separate to that, in the last year or two, we've also seen boosts to national living and national minimum wages, and also an increase in national insurance costs. Factor all of that in for us. What level of impact do these cumulative measures have on the bottom line for a pub?
Absolutely huge. We may have large turnovers, and that's the basis for rates, but our profits, sadly, are rather small. And they've been becoming decreasingly smaller since the burden of the cost of doing business keeps going up. Last year's budget added in £650 million, and with wages going up this year, rates going up this year, as well as beer duty adding in another £125 million, is around £550 million added in this budget alone. That increased the cost of a pint by some 21p last year, and we can expect to see more being passed through if we don't get the government looking at fairer rates.
You represent, I think, 20,000 or so pubs. We were just discussing before the start of the interview that there's 45,000 odd pubs across the country. Where would that have been a decade ago? Or put another way, how many pubs are having to close at the moment, per month or per year?
Well, we know we're seeing a pub close the doors every single day this year. In fact, we estimate we'll lose 378 pubs in 2025 alone. And we've already estimated that without the support from the government to back our pubs, we will see potentially 2,000 pubs close their doors next year. And we don't only lose those jobs and, of course, those economic contributions. It's that social hub, that vital place that we meet in our communities up and down the country. That's what's at risk here, and that's why the government needs to support our pubs.
Is attendance within the pubs that exists also declining? I mean, is that something that you maybe you only have a feel for, or do you have hard data on as well?
Well, we know that times are tough. There's been a cost of living crisis. People need to be able to afford a pint and a trip to the pub, and that's why we keep saying keep a pint affordable for all, so that we can keep our customers coming in. But there is a great love affair with the Great British Pub, and I hope everybody goes out and supports their local this Christmas. They need your support more than ever.
Emma, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Emma McLaughlin from the British Beer and Pub Association. Thanks so much.
Right, Wilf, that's our, in our duty now is to go and support the Great British Pub. I think that's loud and clear from your interview.
What time do they open? Can we just check that?
I think about 11, normally.
What time do they... by law, they can't serve before
Well, we do
lunchtime.
serve breakfast. We do serve breakfast.
OK.
That's
that's
true.
not really what we want.
I reckon from 11, that's
I've already had
acceptable.
my breakfast.
Not today, though.
Actually, you can't serve alcohol before 12, can you?
So we do have licence to sell alcohol before that in some venues, but
There we go.
There you go.
There we go.
Little Christmas present for you, Wilf.
Emma, thanks so much. Very important interview, particularly that fact right at the end of it. Look, we've got lots more still to come on the programme. 2 more hours of coverage, including we're going to be back out to Sydney again. More coverage. Nicole, last hour, unbelievable takes.
We're going to find out just...
Different group of kids this hour.
Well, I'm sure they'll all absolutely love the bad on social media and they'll be really happy about it.
We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Bridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilfred, very good morning from me as well. Lots to get to.
Social media is now banned for under-16s in Australia. Could it pave the way for a similar ban here?
Crisis in maternity care laid bare. Women tell Sky News about their appalling experiences giving birth in the UK.
The NHS urges people to wear masks in public, saying the UK is facing a tidal wave of flu.
Also today, more school leavers are choosing to live at home while completing university study.
We're going to be telling you some of the reasons why young people are not flying the nest a bit sooner.
A very good morning to you. Australian children under the age of 16 have just had their first day without social media after the country's ban came into effect. The Australian government argues the move protects young people, and companies who don't comply now face hefty fines.
So the Prime Minister of Australia has told teenagers that they should start a sport, learn an instrument or read a book. Could it happen here? While there are no current plans for a ban, the UK government says it's important children are able to benefit safely from the digital world. Here's the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese.
This is indeed a proud day to be Australian, because make no mistake, this reform will change lives for Australian kids and allowing them to just have their childhood, for Australian parents, enabling them to have greater peace of mind, but also for the global community who are looking at Australia and saying, well, if Australia can do it, why can't we?
Well, Nicole Johnson's in Sydney for us. Nicole, you've been talking to a lot of parents, a lot of teenagers about this. I think it's fair to say there's a bit of a generational split.
Yeah, it does sound that way, doesn't it? A lot of the parents are supporting this, of course. They're hoping to have some more time with their children to get them off the apps. We're entering into the Australian summer holiday period, but the kids and the ones that we spoke to today, they were concerned. They want to be able to access their social media. They say they use it to talk to their friends, communicate with their friends, and they're worried about that. But a lot of them had already found workarounds. They were using VPNs. They had come up with ways to trick the social media apps into thinking that they were actually older than they really are. Let's take a listen to what some of them had to say.
I think that the ban is good that social media is banned, but there's ways to get around it, and they could have gotten around it a better way. They should have put restrictions, you can't post and you can't comment or subscribe, and you can just view things, or put restrictions on certain videos.
Do you think it's too strict?
I think a bit, yeah, because I feel like after being at school all day and you hang out with your friends and extracurriculars, sometimes you just want to wind down, and maybe you're not allowed TV. Maybe this is a way for you to take a break, but now you can't do that anymore.
So it seems like it doesn't work. Is that what you think?
Yeah, except I think it's just being slow for everyone, so it's going to block everyone within the next week, but everyone's going to find a way around really easily.
How?
Just do other people's IDs. Although that does have to match with your date of birth and name. Just VPNs, getting your parents to do it for you, anything.
The Australian government has acknowledged that there could be problems with trying to introduce this ban. As we just heard from some of those kids, they found ways around it. The government knows that that will happen, but they say regardless, they need to try. They need to do something. And they keep pushing this line that they want children to have their childhoods back. Now, we've heard from the Prime Minister. He's telling kids to go out and read books. Well, the kids didn't sound too keen about that. But the government says that this is a major win for them over those big tech companies. Now, they're facing fines of up to £30 million if they don't comply. So far, most of them have got on board. They're not happy about it, but they are complying. And over the last couple of weeks, we've seen them already start to take kids off those apps.
Nicole, it's so interesting seeing those kids kind of basically reveal that they've still managed to get around it. But particularly given that the ban requires the companies to enforce it, and they'll be fined. If not, one guesses in time it will be more effective as they start to implement it. I'm still really interested on the kind of level of nationwide support and the political support, because clearly this has been introduced by the Labour government. But when you were speaking to those parents earlier, it felt like quite widespread, the support, and one just wonders, give it a bit of time, if it's implemented effectively, whether this is something that will get picked up in countries like the UK as well, even if the government currently isn't supporting it.
Yes, most of the sentiment that's come out of Australia does seem to be widely supportive, and both the Labor and Liberal governments have backed it. The opposition, of course, has said that it could have been done in a better way, that it may not be effective enough, but there does seem widespread support for this. And one of the interesting lines that the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, had to say earlier today was that he regards this as a major cultural shift in Australia, a real sort of social experiment. And as you said, Wilf, it's something that the rest of the world is paying attention to. Australia knows that. They've had representation from all sorts of countries coming to Australia to see how this ban will work, and they have been pushing it at an international level. They were at the UN General Assembly speaking about it with world leaders there. It's been really also sort of strongly advocated for by the mothers and parents of Australian young people who've taken their lives after online and cyberbullying. And that is something that the government has really been talking about a lot, wanting to end online bullying, addiction, and just get kids outside again.
Nicole, great stuff. Thanks so much. We really appreciate it. And, you know, Sophie, what I think is fantastic, like anyone can celebrate here, is we get to see how it works. I mean, in a country that's, you know, got pretty similar kind of population dynamics as we have, and give it a month or a year, we'll be able to know if this is sort of worth pursuing just purely on the tangible kind of results, as opposed to often the kind of politicisation of these topics.
Yeah, and I think your point as well about how it's quite important that the onus is on the companies who will be prosecuted for this, rather than the children or the parents. You know, that perhaps will, if there are fines being levied or that kind of thing, then that could actually lead to that change.
Yeah, well, I also, you know, the two big parties in, it's confusing on the name sometimes, are Labour and the Liberals. And to see the two biggest parties behind it, I think is interesting as well. Obviously here we don't have many consensus behind it. The debate here tends to focus on whether they should be banned in schools, smartphones. It's slightly different. But it could be something that there's consensus on. What I think is really interesting on this happening in Australia is even the sort of loudest free speech warriors, you haven't seen jumping on a bandwagon, like they do, by the way, when you see a person here arrested for whatever they've said online or not, because it is a cut-off at 16. It's not about free speech, it's about what's right for kids. So again, you can kind of see this could be picked up more widely, even in somewhere like the US potentially, because it's not really going against, you know, free speech if it's for children.
Yeah.
They're banned from doing lots of things.
And it's not... It doesn't split, as you think, on political lines as well. Like, for example, I would actually say that Kemi Badenoch's Conservative Party are more strident on this stuff than the Labour Party, particularly, you know, phones in schools, you mentioned, right? You know, they want a ban on phones in schools, which the Labour Party are resisting.
Yeah, I haven't seen, like, for example, the likes of Elon Musk tweet aggressively against this yet. I mean, maybe I've missed that, but they tweet pretty aggressively about lots of things in the UK.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
That triggers them. So it could just be something that everyone comes along with. But they've got to learn how to enforce it, first of all, because those kids clearly are getting around it.
I love the reaction to say that they should read a book. What?
I know.
No.
I know. Classic stuff from Nicole, that. Now, it's flu season, and the NHS is warning that it's come earlier and hit harder than before. The Health Service is urging people to wear face coverings on public transport to try and stop the spread of flu.
The chief executive of NHS Providers, which represents NHS Trust, said we're facing a very nasty strain of flu that had hit earlier in the year than normal, and people who are coughing and sneezing should wear face coverings on public transport, just like during COVID.
Oh, gosh, triggering thoughts. Molly is here to discuss this. Molly, what exactly has been advised and guided, and who's saying it?
Yeah, so important on who's saying it, because this is NHS providers, which are the body that represent trust. It's not like the chief executive of the NHS, but still important to listen to what they're saying. We are at peak levels of flu this year, and the NHS providers are calling it uncharted, unprecedented territory because of how early it's come, because of the record levels of flu. So this was in an interview. They said, we need to get back into the habit that if you're coughing and sneezing, but you're not unwell enough to not go to work, then you must wear a mask when you're in public spaces, including on public transport, to stop the chances of you giving your virus to somebody else. So, as you say, it's quite a haunting sort of instruction there. That's, as I say, from the chief executive of NHS providers, and that's because we've got more than 1,700 patients in flu beds in England as of last week.
The thing that gets me about flu is that people always talk about flu like it's a cold.
It's not.
And it is not like a cold, is it?
Cold, no.
Yeah.
That's why, actually, I rather flippantly said to you this morning, I've had flu, and I was like, I actually probably shouldn't have said that, because I haven't had flu. I've had a really bad cold.
It's a big deal. It's a really big deal, right?
Yeah, stay away. But no, Downing Street have actually been quite clear to say this is not a kind of new nor an instruction, but simply something people can consider when trying to limit the spread of winter respiratory illnesses. The best defence against flu is the vaccine, which is why we're ramping up our vaccination efforts. So they're quite importantly pointing out that this is not a diktat, this is not a kind of new thing, but we have had bodies like the UK Health Security Agency also saying it's a useful tool. So it's not a kind of, instruction, but they're saying, look, consider it, it's not a new thing. We're just saying that you should look at doing it.
And when you talk about being triggered as well, it's like, I guess it is quite different from, telling everyone you've got to wear a mask on public transport, which is so triggering, and also saying, like, you know what, if you are ill, please don't go and sneeze in someone's face on the train, which also feels quite reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's that government spokesperson comment. It's not an instruction, but this flu season's going to be really, really bad.
It is true.
And it's going to put
it's
a lot of pressure.
Not even hit the proper peak yet.
I saw the statistic from Sir Jim Mackey, the NHS chief executive, who said by the end of this week there'd be up to 8,000 people in hospital with flu. So again, it's whether it's people getting ill or missing work, but the NHS with a resident doctor strike, got to do all we can, but it's not a government instruction. Molly, great stuff. Thanks so much. Now, the independent public spending watchdog has ruled the UK's current asylum processes are flawed and costing taxpayers more than it should. In the last year alone, it's estimated nearly £5 billion was spent on the asylum system. So
this has been looked at by the National Audit Office. They were also looking at some cases filed 3 years ago, and they found more than half still haven't been resolved. Our communities correspondent Lisa Holland has been talking to one person who's still in limbo.
Ibrahim is Palestinian. He came to the UK 2 years ago on a tourist visa, then claimed asylum. With his claim unresolved, Ibrahim says he wants to move on with his life to support his partner Yvonne and their daughter Alicia, who was born 5 weeks ago. He says he can't return to his home in the West Bank because of his political activism.
In your case, in the time you've been waiting to have your claim processed, you've met your partner and you've had a baby.
I don't think you need 2 years to process any asylum claim. I don't think there is any case that is complicated to that level. I'm not single anymore, and I've got other responsibilities now.
The National Audit Office, which is the UK's independent public spending watchdog, has been looking at the processing and costs of people claiming asylum. It analysed a sample of 5,000 asylum claims lodged almost 3 years ago. Of those 5,000 claims, the NAO found 35% have so far been granted. 9% of the claimants have been removed from the UK. But the claims of more than half, 56%, remain unresolved.
Government has tended to take short-term reactive interventions to fix problems, but then these have led to other pressures forming elsewhere in the system and new backlogs forming. And that's led to wasted funds, that's led to poor outcomes for asylum seekers, and that's led to harm to the government's ability to meet its obligations to citizens.
Do you think the Home Office is up to the job of administering all of this?
I think the Home Office realises that outcomes aren't what they should be. We've seen a lot of positive efforts within the Home Office, but it's not systematic and it's still piecemeal.
The National Audit Office estimates in the last year the Home Office and Ministry of Justice spent nearly £5 billion on asylum, more than £2 billion of that on asylum hotels.
That is a slug is dead.
Before meeting his partner, Ibrahim says he stayed in 3 hotels funded by the Home Office, where he complained about the food and conditions.
The system is more than broken. It crossed that limit long time ago.
Ibrahim is one of more than 60,000 asylum cases currently awaiting an initial decision. But with delays in decision-making just part of the problem, the government has been scrambling to show it has the policies to tackle the issues raised, saying it's announced the most sweeping changes to the asylum system in a generation and is already making progress. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Well, European ministers, including the Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, will meet in Strasbourg today to discuss a potential shake-up of the European Convention on Human Rights.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Rob Powell, here today. Right, what's going on, Rob?
So it's an informal meeting of ministers, justice ministers, interior ministers, migration ministers. So as we were talking about last hour, a bit weird, I think, that it's not someone from the Home Office that's gone, that this has landed on David Lammy's rapidly expanding in-tray at the MOJ now.
Things to solve.
Yeah. Good luck, Deputy Prime Minister. What it's about is basically looking at how interpretations of the European Convention on Human Rights can be modernised, updated, basically for an era where people are able to move around a lot more freely. It's easier for people to move between countries. It's not about changing it. It's about eventually reaching a political declaration that all the countries in the Council of Europe that sign up to this can sign, that basically says, this is how we think bits of this convention can now be interpreted. That matters, of course, because it's bits of the ECHR that have stood in the way of failed asylum seekers being deported, of foreign national offenders being deported, not just in the UK, but in other countries around Europe as well. That's caused a lot of political tension and has led to the rise of parties like Reform here, but also other populist right parties across Europe as well.
It's interesting, Rob, because there's parts, and some of this was announced by the Home Office recently, where they can kind of quite quickly say, we're now interpreting this part of the ECHR differently, and it just happened. Whereas then there's much more complicated parts which they pointed to that are going to need all of Europe to agree on. What are the kind of parts we're differentiating on that?
Yeah, the bit that the Home Office thinks it can do without necessarily having to go and talk to other European countries is the right to a family life, Article 8 provision. It believes it can just issue guidance basically to the UK courts to say, interpret this in this way, but that's because that can be traded off against other rights. It's not an absolute right. So it can say, you should consider that right a bit less and you should prioritise national security, say, sovereignty a bit more. The problem with a different one, Article 3, which is basically protects against inhumane treatment and torture, is that it's absolute. You can't go, yeah, but this. If it applies full stop. And that's why you need the approval and agreement of other European countries to try and sort of tweak how countries' courts are able to interpret it. And ultimately, that's to make sure that if we get to a point where, say, someone is being deported back to a country, they are trying to say they have a risk of being tortured or inhumane treatment over there, the court says, no, we don't think that applies. It gives them some protection against appealing to Strasbourg.
It's so interesting. I mean, it's quite a deep dive into aspects of the kind of legality of this, but it's right at the crux of the small boats crisis, isn't it? And quite interesting to have it explained in that way. Thanks, Rob.
Now, a member of the British forces has died in what's been described as a tragic accident while watching a weapons test in Ukraine. They were away from the front line and the death is not believed to be the result of enemy fire.
It is the first time a serving soldier has died in Ukraine since Russia's invasion, but we don't yet know the name of the victim or their rank.
In a statement, the Ministry of Defence has said it's with deep regret that we must announce that a member of the UK Armed Forces died in Ukraine this morning on Tuesday, the 9th of December. So this came yesterday. He was injured in a tragic accident while observing Ukrainian forces testing a new defence capability away from the front lines. The family has been notified and our thoughts are with them at this sad and difficult time.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump says his Ukrainian counterpart needs to accept the reality of the war against Russia as efforts continue to reach a peace deal.
In an interview with Politico, the US president went on to criticise European leaders for their handling of negotiations, saying they talk too much and labelling them as weak.
I think they're weak, but I also think that They want to be so politically correct. I think they don't know what to do. Europe doesn't know what to do. They don't know what to do on trade either. I mean, I look at a lot of the trade, situation that's going on over there. It's a little bit dangerous, but Europe, they want to be politically correct, and it makes them weak. That's what makes them weak.
More of the same sort of rhetoric from President Trump. I think we talked about this a bit earlier on Cheat Sheet on the podcast, but striking rhetoric, actions obviously speak louder, and we'll see where the negotiations go. But that rhetoric, I'm sure, is flying around Russia right now as well. So at the very least, it's so undermining and supportive of that.
Yeah. Right, let's talk some more about that social media ban in Australia. Everyone under the age of 16 now banned from using social media.
The move is, of course, coming in Australia, and many leaders around the world are closely watching it to see whether they should implement something similar. Let's debate this topic, and we're joined, I'm delighted to say, by Jess Asto, the Labour MP for Lowestoft, and Adam Saturiano, the technology correspondent at the New York Times. A very good morning to you both.
Yeah,
Great to see you. Jess, I'll start with you. This is something you support. You'd like to see a ban on social media under 16s here as well?
Yeah, so earlier this year I was one of the co-sponsors of a private members' bill led by Josh McAllister, where we were seeking to do just this, to raise the social media age of consent for children to 16 in the UK. We know that there is widespread cross-party support, but also 75% of the public are supportive of this, and 86% of UK parents.
Not your government, though. Not the Labour Party.
Well, the fact is that I think the government is looking to see what happens in the Australian model. As Anthony Albanese, the PM there, said, we need to let kids be kids. And I think that
do you
looking
really
at the evidence is going to be really crucial.
They say that they're watching it, but they're saying they've got no plans to implement it. It doesn't sound like they're about to, press the green light, does it?
Well, it's important that we are evidence-led. And while there is correlating factors with this huge rise that we've seen in children's mental health problems, not just in the UK, but across the world, clearly there is not yet causational. Now, I believe that we should take the precautionary principle, because we're talking about children, and none of these products have ever been tested or developed by child development experts. We see that there is a huge rise in children who are consuming self-harm content and then having suicidal ideation. My view is that if we can see that happening, we need to make sure that we stop it.
Adam, I mean, obviously, as a tech correspondent at the New York Times, very interested in your take on how this is going down in the US. We're watching it closely here. Is it as triggering to the sort of free speech debate in the US as when, say, in the UK, someone gets arrested for a post online? Is this something that they're sort of less bothered about?
It hasn't been as linked to the free speech debate, but I think what's happening in why this is getting so much attention is that this is clearly an issue that's top of mind for all parents in terms of how much their children are using social media and how much attention is being spent on their smartphones. And so this is something that is being debated in the United States, and there's been certain age verifications, things that have happened in certain states around some sorts of content, like it's happened in the UK. Whether or not some states would go as far as to trying to prohibit social media, that remains to be seen. But what I see, whether it's the United States or the UK or Europe or Australia, is that this has even become an issue to this point, is like a really kind of a warning to the social media companies, and I think a wake-up call.
That's interesting. It's a wake-up call to social media companies. I guess that, it's kind of part of the point of it as well. Jess, it feels to me, I don't think it's fair, but that the Labour Party and the Labour government have been a bit kind of reluctant to kind of really use all the tools at their disposal. They haven't banned phones in schools. They haven't said that they are they haven't been as warm as other countries around the world and saying they're watching what's happening in Australia. Do you think they're a bit in hock to Trump? What's going on?
Well, we've just seen the Online Safety Act come into force earlier this year. The age verification ban on pornography came in July. Actually, along with the previous government, this government is leading the world in making sure that the internet is safer for kids. Clearly, this is a step that I would like to see the government take, but it's untrue to say that this government isn't incredibly committed. And you'll see that Liz Kendall's very first act that she did was to make sure that we strengthen self-harm, in particular, content regulations. And, we'll keep pushing for changes, particularly on things like, for example, sort of nudification apps and so forth. We know that the government has been taking some really, really strong measures in the legislation that's coming forward soon.
Adam, what's the view of the big tech companies and their bosses towards this sort of policy? I mean, I doubt they're in favour of it, but is it something that they would be willing to work with and it wouldn't lead them to cancel their other expansion plans in the UK? Do you think the mood music, the sort of middle ground is shifting?
Perhaps. I mean, they've been very much against this for all the reasons that you would expect. I mean, in Australia, there's hundreds of thousands of teens who are on Snapchat and Instagram and other apps like this. And I think the argument that they've been making is that this is disproportionate, that teens are going to be are not being able to use these sort of apps and sort of with the new safety things that they put forward, making arguments like that. Obviously, they've been making that argument in Australia and it hasn't broken through.
Can I just follow up, I guess, on that and my earlier question? I haven't seen it, but maybe I've missed it. The Elon Musks of this world, they're not riling against this policy in the same way that perhaps he is when Graham Linehan got arrested in a UK airport. I guess my point is this something that the most vociferous free speech libertarian in any country might kind of sign up to or accept, do you think, going forward or not?
I don't know. I can't speak. It's hard to put yourself inside their minds on this sort of stuff. But thus far, you're right. You haven't seen them speaking out in the same sort of way that they've latched on to other issues that have been sort of tied to the free speech debate. But so far, this issue has been so far pretty isolated into Australia. And now it's getting a lot of attention, of course, and if you start to see it in other places, then perhaps they will speak out more. I think you'll see if like the EU or if this starts to spread, you'll start to see leaders of these tech companies and their allies speak out more against it. What that means for what the Trump administration or others might do, I don't know.
That's really interesting. Thanks both very much. Great to have you on and get your perspective.
Jess, really, really great.
Thank you.
Coming up, we're going to be talking again about young people because more than ever, they're choosing to live at home while studying at university or college. We're going to be talking to the chief of UCAS about just why that is.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Welcome back. A reminder of the top stories this hour. A new world for Australian teens to navigate as Australia bans children from using social media if they're under the age of 16. The law is designed to protect youngsters from potential mental health risks, cyberbullying and inappropriate content.
There's a warning to people with flu symptoms that they should wear a mask in public spaces to tackle what's been described as a tidal wave of flu. The chief executive of NHS providers that represents NHS Trust says we're facing a really nasty strain that has struck earlier in the year than normal.
The spending watchdog has ruled the UK's current asylum processes are flawed and wasting taxpayers' money. The National Audit Office estimates in the last year nearly £5 billion was spent on asylum, with nearly half of that on asylum hotels. Now, more young people than ever are choosing to live at home while studying at university or college. A new report from UCAS has found nearly 90,000 school leavers in the UK plan to stay at home when they start courses next year, with the cost of living crisis one of the driving factors. Let's talk about it now with Dr. Jo Saxton, who's the UCAS Chief Executive. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here to talk about this issue.
So the stats on this are kind of crazy. I think I'm right that 31% of 18-year-olds going to university are now planning to do so while living at home.
That's right. The data we're releasing later today shows a record number of young people are choosing to live at home whilst they undertake their university studies. And if we look back over the last 10 years, it used to be 20%. So that's a real change over that decade.
Even 20% is higher than I would have expected. But clearly, as you say, it's a big, big increase. What's driving the increase?
Well, at UCAS, we talk to students all the time, and they tell us that cost of living is really high in their minds when they're thinking about that university choice. But we also think there's a London factor. I mean, in London, you can't go anywhere without being really close to a university. And the huge growth that we're seeing in young people choosing university is coming in particular from London. So there's an interplay between how expensive it is to live in London and how many universities are here.
So that I guess those 18-year-olds, as you're sort of implying, can access a university where they can still live at home. Because I was going to ask about that. Was it leading to more people also picking their local university or doing courses online perhaps as well? Because it was sort of such a striking statistic, 31%, that I didn't quite know how it was possible. But I guess it's more the London factor than anything else.
The London factor is definitely an issue. But if you zoom out, again, today's data is going to show record numbers of 18-year-olds choosing university. So cost of living or living at home, these aren't barriers to participation. Young people are choosing university on a scale that we've never seen before. And they have that choice. Particularly in London, they can easily commute to a university. But there's always been a trend of studying locally. There are so many brilliant universities in the UK, students often choose local where the courses are right for them. But I think the thing that really matters is that they have that choice.
People go to university for lots of reasons. I guess the academic qualification is the top reason, I would imagine. But the social experience is perhaps as important. Some would say, more important. Is that going to be a risk for these 31% of people who are going to live at home?
Well, as I said, we talk to thousands of students every week at UCAS, and they tell us that the number one reason they choose university is to invest in their future and to get themselves further up on that career ladder. They really see it as an investment in their future. Of course, they want to have a nice time socially, but they don't see that, living at home or living in halls or on campus, that isn't the driver for them.
In terms of university versus apprenticeships, I was really interested by the phraseology that the Prime Minister used. He was speaking at the McLaren factory.
I was with him there.
Oh, were you?
Monday, yes.
OK, brilliant. Well, I mean, he was pretty explicit, I thought. It was in response to a question, so maybe he exaggerated his answer more than he intended. But I read that as him pushing apprenticeships over university as opposed to promoting apprenticeships as a viable and equal alternative.
Well, I talked to him at length on Monday, and he was really clear that he was very explicit in saying, I'm not bashing university. University is brilliant. It was the right choice for me. What he cares about is the same thing we care about at UCAS, that young people have that choice. And his view is that apprenticeships haven't always had the same status. That's the thing he really cares about. But I think one of the things that's really important to remember with apprenticeships is all apprenticeships are provided either with a university or a further education college. So one of the things that I think is so useful for your viewers to understand is that it isn't necessarily a binary choice. It doesn't have to be studying with a university or an apprenticeship.
Just to wrap things up, I mean, clearly a topic we talked about a lot, the percentage of young people, I think we classify that as under 25, not in education, employment or training has been rising and hitting quite worrying levels. What's your take on that and the best way to address it?
Well, I think what really matters is that young people get the information, advice and guidance that they need, and that's the thing that we're experts in at UCAS. We know that young people are worried about cost of living, and so that's one of the reasons why just last week at UCAS we launched a new tool that puts all of the financial support available to universities. All that information is in one place, so that anyone who would like to do further study, who isn't sure what they might do next, can come to UCAS and can see that there are universities bending over backwards to give them the support to help them take that next step.
Dr. Jo Saxton, thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you.
Thank you.
The Chief Executive of UCAS.
Really interesting to hear some of those reasons for young people.
Yeah, a striking statistic, 31% will still be at home. Now, we've been talking all week about the crisis in maternity care. A report by Baroness Amos yesterday was utterly damning, with stories of women being ignored, filthy wards, and the most heartbreaking of all, avoidable baby deaths. Today, the state of the services across the country will once again be laid bare when annual data is released from the Care Quality Commission later this morning.
Well, the state of maternity care in this country is a story that on this programme we're not just going to do once and then forget about it, we are going to keep going. And after our reporting yesterday, we've been absolutely overwhelmed by stories from you guys about the, frankly, appalling care that you've experienced. So we just wanted to take a moment, reflect some of those stories. These are the voices of producers.
I was sick up to 30 to 36 times a day. I couldn't function, but I was never believed. I was told everybody gets sick in pregnancy. Even when I was laying on a toilet floor in A&E for 6 hours, unable to get up, they still didn't believe me.
I nearly lost my baby due to doctors not listening to me. I was sent home at 6 a.m. with contractions that were 3 minutes apart. The doctor was rude and discharged me. I drove home while in labour.
My midwife told me to stop making noise and refused to give me gas and air. No one came to check on me for over an hour, and I was on my own and terrified with my first baby.
Well, so many of you have been getting in touch with us directly, and please do continue to do so. Our email's mornings@sky.uk.
The thing that's really struck me, listening to some of the stories that you shared and also reading that report yesterday from Baroness Amos, is how we deal with baby loss in particular. And honestly, the lack of humanity, the lack of compassion is pretty breathtaking at times. So we wanted to share with you the story of one of our viewers, Sina. Sina messaged us and she has then gone on to send this video, which, in my view, really goes to the heart of a lot that we're getting wrong with the NHS.
I had been on a ward post-procedure of removing the remains of our past baby, along with lots of new mums and their newborns, and that just felt absolutely horrifying to have to try and hide my tears. Similarly, the midwife coming up to my bedside to congratulate me on my pregnancy, even though I clearly passed the baby. And then there were the subsequent phone calls asking me why I hadn't showed up to scans in the following weeks, even though I'd miscarried in that same hospital, as well as numerous letters asking me why I'd missed appointments, again, from the same hospital. They didn't connect the dots. They didn't think that it could be an issue even. It should have been flagged and I should have been allowed time to grieve. And they didn't even offer any sort of bereavement condolences or service or anything that might have helped me cope better.
Well, that was Sina sharing her story bravely with us, and we thank her for that. So many of you have contacted us, and we're going to continue sharing your stories on this topic. One email came through during the programme this morning, and this has been from someone who's telling us about their experience of the NHS. They're an anaesthetist who said at the bottom of their email, "I'm happy for more stories to be told, but please don't publish my name. The NHS is hostile to those who speak out."
So I think that says quite a lot. To be honest, they want their story to be shared, but they don't want their name published. They went on to say, "I spend a lot of time on labour wards. I've seen countless cases of poor care. Often we're only called into the room at the very end, often as things have begun to go very wrong. There is often an extreme resistance to having doctors, especially anaesthetists, involved in the care of the labouring women. Midwives try to cling to pre-made birth plans as if they're the holy grail and totally fail to recognise that things aren't going well and intervention is needed."
Finally, I would add, this is the rest of the email, there is still resistance to allowing women to have adequate pain relief. By the time they come to labour ward, they're already exhausted, frightened and extreme pain. We need much better joint-up care in the whole process.
It's interesting because this does chime, I should say, with what several of the reviews have found, including the Ockenden review, that there can be this kind of reluctance, I guess, to listen to women if they're asking for pain relief, if they're asking for C-sections, for example, resistance to that. And I think it's very interesting to hear from someone directly involved in this process from the NHS, because another of the criticisms by people such as Jeremy Hunt, the former Health Secretary, has been this culture against whistleblowing in the NHS as well.
Again, as we said, we're going to continue to cover this story on mornings on Sky News more broadly, so please do continue to share your extraordinarily shocking stories with us, and we'll share them again more widely.
Now, Storm Bram has hit parts of the UK with 90-mile-an-hour winds, leaving thousands of homes without power and causing complete chaos for commuters. We can have a look now at some of the impact.
Residents along the riverside in York have been advised to take immediate action to protect themselves and their properties due to flooding from the River Ouse.
Well, the storm led to this pretty hair-raising abandoned landing at Bristol Airport. You can just see the winds there shaking the plane and impacting it. There were 91 flight cancellations at Dublin Airport as well, and more disruption expected.
We are joined now by the co-director of Flooded People UK, Louis Ramirez. Thanks so much for joining us on this, Louis. What's expected in the days ahead? And I guess just recap for us what it follows in recent weeks when it comes to flooding.
Well, for Storm Bran, if you look at South Wales, I've talked to people who have received, I think, 8 warnings in 3 weeks. And oftentimes these people can become accustomed to warnings. But yesterday was really scary along the Taff Valley, among other places. So the rain has largely passed right now from Storm Bran. But I think what's really challenging is that there might be even more rain coming into the weekend. And then at that point, you can see multiplications of incidents and really serious incidents all around the country.
Is it frustrating for you to see how kind of poorly prepared, parts of the country are for this? I mean, we get rain, right? It shouldn't be a surprise to us when it happens.
Yeah, it's more heartbreaking than frustrating, to be honest, because we just have a system that's not fit for purpose. And so one of the things that I'll tend to say is that in England and Wales, if the flooding comes from a river with a name, it's one authority, the Environment Agency. And if it comes from a river or a brook without a name, then it's another authority. And I'm sure you can imagine that when you've got water up to your ankles in your living room, you might have other concerns in figuring out the name of the river. And that just cuts across the board. So for instance, right now, what we've got is a system of protecting with too few resources only the places that are most economic. Striking to see York up there, because York actually was protected, and here we're seeing that it's still not enough. So, on the receiving end of that, what you've got is families who are often flooding multiple times, whose oftentimes their house was their only asset. They can't sell it. Their kids are telling them to move out. These are really, really tough situations on people that just devastate their mental health, steal their sense of safety in the home. And to see the government and the country not stepping up, but also just the lack of care and support is not frustrating. It's just really heartbreaking. And you see this now, 3 times a month every winter.
Is it always the same places that tend to be hit over the last decade, or does it vary?
I think there's some places that get hit more than others and that get hit repeatedly, but it just bears saying that the stats for England are that 1 in 4 homes will be at risk by 2040. Now, granted, some of these homes are at very low risk, but what you're looking at is a very, very widespread, very kind of diverse set of risk portfolios, which means that an awful lot of places can get hit, depending on the severity of the incident. What we've seen this winter is that definitely South Wales has really taken the brunt of this in a way that's extremely difficult on the people there.
What's the kind of projections when it comes to the weather? I'm kind of interested, are we getting kind of more rain, more extreme weather than we're used to, or actually is the trend not that way?
The Met Office will give you every month how wet it was relative to average. And yeah, we've had a really wet November and we are tending to get more rain than ever. And the problem is that you've got more rain than ever, more storms than ever, but it's also falling on more concrete than ever. And it's falling on worse infrastructure than ever. And that's what you've got, this really toxic cocktail for people.
That's interesting about the concrete thing, actually. And what's the advice for people if you might be hit by a storm or a flood? What support is available to you?
Well, very little support is available, and that's why charities like ourselves get popping up. So what we do is we'll connect you in a Facebook group that's really well moderated with only other people who have gone through the same thing you have, and we found that that can be quite helpful because it's people who really understand what it's like to have your home invaded by dirty water like that. They understand the really difficult process of recovery all that time. So that's one resource that's out there. There are occasional grants, but that system is not very good either. So for instance, sometimes you get flooded and it's not a named storm and the government will tell you that they're not making the grants available. But of course, for the people receiving it, a flood's a flood. So there's few kind of volunteer initiatives a lot of the time that end up carrying the burden. And that's part of the challenge with this. And that's part of why you can't just leave it to these mutual aid and kind of citizen initiatives. You also need to get that policy change to back them up and, in a way, meet them halfway with the efforts they're doing in communities already.
Louis, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to go to break, but afterwards we're going to debate more the scale of flu that's spreading across the country. In particular, talk to a school who are resorting to, well, COVID-like measures to try and stop the spread.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionately. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Welcome back. Well, if you or someone you know has been hit by flu recently, you're probably not surprised to hear hospitals across the country have been forced to declare critical incidents as cases soar.
So it's so bad it's been called the super flu, and in what you could say is a pretty unwelcome flashback to the COVID pandemic days. Some schools are actually now locking down to try and stop the spread. Well, Brian Guthrie is the head teacher at County Londonderry School, where more than 170 kids were off sick in one day. So talk us through what is going on in your school and what measures have you had to take? I like the clock. I just saw the clock.
Might have to ask you about Mo Salah.
Yeah, we might have to ask a Mo Salah question at the end as well.
Thank you. No, so currently our attendance is right back up to 95, 96%. However, a fortnight ago, we were down sitting in the low 60s to mid 60s. We have just under 500 children in school, so that equated to 160 to 170 pupils off over a course of 2 to 3 days.
You know, we mentioned there in the intro the sort of muscle memory everyone has about COVID. Is this much closer to a typical bad flu season that might have appeared over any year in the last couple of decades, or is it closer to, in terms of the measures you have to put in place, to COVID?
I think the numbers previously would have been maybe mid-80s, low to mid-80s, when we would have been hit at our worst time with any flu or other outbreak. I should say the illnesses we experienced, it wasn't just down to flu. There were a number of other things as well. We did go and increase certain mitigations within classrooms. We had additional cleaning throughout the school day. We brought back out a sanitising spray gun, and it was used for point of contact during the day. We encouraged the catch it, bin it, kill it within our school. We enhanced our hand washing throughout the school day, particularly with our younger children. As we were seeing, it was sort of our primary 1, primary 2, those 4 to 5 year olds who were having the biggest impact with regards to school absence.
We've seen some schools taking the pretty unbelievable step, really, of closing completely to try and stop the spread of flu. What's your reaction to that? Do you think that actually, look, they've got to get a grip on it if it's running rampant, or do you think actually, you know what, this is not the right thing to do because kids have been missing their education?
Well, for ourselves in school, for me, it was potentially an option I might have had to have gone with because we had so many staff off as well. I have a number of classroom assistants, and that particular week we had 14 classroom assistants, 3 teachers off as well. So putting in class cover was a bit of an issue and a bit of a stress during that week. If schools were having an impact like that and we're finding it that through health and safety wise, they simply couldn't cover the children in school, I can understand why they may take consideration at either closing the school or closing particular year groups. I was glad to say that the dedicated staff we have here in Ebrington all pulled together and worked so well to ensure that we didn't have to go down that route.
Can we quickly ask where you stand on Mo Salah?
Yes.
Would Klopp have handled it differently, I guess, is the question.
Oh, that you're really challenging me now. I know I might have the same hairstyle as Slot. I don't think my football knowledge would be similar. Klopp, yes, two different personalities as managers, very much. We can see that. Mo Salah, for everything he's given to Liverpool, an amazing player. I hope it's not the last time we've seen him wearing a red shirt. I want to see him back on the pitch.
There we go.
Thanks for being a good sport with our final question as well. And fingers crossed that, you know, everyone at your school continues to make a recovery from flu. It's been brutal, hasn't it? It has been brutal. Thank you.
Now, Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado will miss the ceremony to award her the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo today. Her whereabouts is currently unknown. She last appeared in public 11 months ago. Ali's able to join us on this. Ali, there'd been much speculation that she was going to go there to receive this award, which was hotly anticipated. That's now not going to be the case.
Well, yeah, I mean, officially, according to the Peace Prize Committee, she won't be here. But we have spoken to members of her family this morning who still say that they hope she will be able to make the trip. They're hoping, you know, not just to come here and collect the Nobel Peace Prize, but actually they haven't seen her. Many of her direct family have not seen her for about a year and a half, and they're really hoping to be reunited with her here in Oslo. So it's a bit unclear at the moment. There's a lot of mystery around her whereabouts for obvious security reasons. There were rumours that the Americans might be trying to help her get out of Venezuela, but it's not just the difficulties of getting here. There is also the problem is if she made it to Oslo, would she be able to then get back into Venezuela and continue her campaign against the president dictator Nicolas Maduro? The ceremony takes place at 1 o'clock, it's about 3 hours, in the city hall here, and if she is not present, we believe her sister will collect the prize on her behalf. There's a plaza being set up and a stage set up outside as well for the first time this year to let the Norwegian public come and watch the ceremony. If Machado does not come, she would not be the first to have not made it. 6 people in the past have been unable to come here in person, including perhaps most famous was Aung San Suu Kyi in 1991 for the same reasons. She was unable to leave Myanmar at the time.
Ali, thanks so much. Really great to have you jump on. Hopefully we can get you back next time. We can talk about it in a little bit more detail, but we don't have time. This hour, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more from Australia. This smartphone ban for under-16s that's come into effect.
Yeah, could it be happening here? We're going to try it and find out. We're also going to be finding out how it's gone down with parents, but also the kids themselves. I think it's not really spoiler to say they're not that happy about it.
Well, it's like taking away your favourite toy, isn't it? Early teens. We'll be right back.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf, good morning from me as well, as the first day of Australia's social media ban comes into force.
As Sophie said, social media banned now for those under the age of 16 in Australia. Could it pave the way for something similar happening here?
There's a warning that backlogs and delays in the asylum system are wasting taxpayers' money. As an asylum seeker tells us, the system is more than broken.
The NHS urges people to wear masks in public, saying the UK is facing a tidal wave of flu.
We're also continuing our focus on the crisis in maternity care, talking to a couple who lost their baby about what they think needs to change.
And progress for women who say they're abused by Mohammed Al Fayed in their legal case. One of those women will join us live.
Hello, good morning. Australian children under the age of 16 have just had their first day without social media. It's after the ban came into effect. So the government there argues the move protects young people, and companies who don't comply now face some pretty hefty fines.
The Prime Minister told teenagers they should start a sport, learn an instrument, nice and easy, just learn an instrument, or read a book. Well, could that all follow suit and happen here? There are no current plans for the UK government to adopt a similar ban. Then the government say children should be able to benefit safely from the digital world. Well, here's the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese.
This is indeed a proud day to be Australian, because make no mistake, this reform will change lives for Australian kids and allowing them to just have their childhood. For Australian parents, enabling them to have greater peace of mind. But also for the global community who are looking at Australia and saying, well, if Australia can do it, why can't we?
Well, Nicole Johnson's in Sydney for us. Nicole, we heard it there. Kids are being told to learn instruments, play sport, read a book. How is it going down with them?
Well, it's not quite that easy, is it? The kids didn't sound too impressed about that line from Anthony Albanese. Most of the ones that we've spoken to still want to be able to access their social media. They're not happy about the ban. It is coming as a bit of a shock, even though we've known about this for months, and they are finding ways around it. And that has been the big concern about this from the beginning of the announcement that these laws would be coming into effect, that the kids would simply outsmart the apps. Let's take a listen to some of them.
I think that the ban is good, that like social media is banned, but there's ways to get around it, and they could have gotten around it a better way. Like they should have put restrictions, like you can't post and you can't comment or subscribe, and you can just view things, or put restrictions on certain videos.
Do you think it's too strict?
I think a bit, yeah, because I feel like after being at school all day and you hang out with your friends and extracurriculars, sometimes you just want to like wind down, and maybe you're not allowed TV. Maybe this is a way for you to like take a break, but now you can't do that anymore.
So it seems like it doesn't work. Is that what you think?
Yeah, except I think it's just being slow for everyone, so it's going to block everyone within the next week, but everyone's going to find a way around really easily.
How?
Just do other people's IDs, although that does have to match with your date of birth and name. Just VPNs, getting your parents to do it for you, anything.
I mean, fantastic. I love the ingenuity of kids. Nicole, I guess... Oh, no, sorry, Nicole's gone. Sorry.
Yeah, you have to talk to me instead, Will.
I wasn't listening. We were told that. There I was... focusing on my social media whilst I should have been listening. I mean, I love the ingenuity of kids. The last one's really interesting, though, that there's a big point in it, because this law in Australia is putting the responsibility on the social media companies, not on parents. But obviously, if a parent helps you get around it, then maybe the social media companies should be let off a little bit. But it hasn't necessarily been, perfect implementation on day one. One assumes it will be if these social media companies will get fined if kids are getting around it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really interesting to see the results.
This is the key, isn't it, Wilf? What do you think then? Because I guess it is interesting that they've done the onus on the social media firms. Do you think that will mean that they're going to have to actually up their game?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think we've seen, here as well, by implementing age checks as it relates to porn sites, that VPNs is a classic way around that. Downloads for VPNs soared. There's always going to be ways around it. I think what will be fascinating for us is this is a pretty similar country to ours with similar dynamics going on, and it's a test case. And one of the things I think was really interesting that the parents alluded to is that it's going to be really hard if you're 14 years old and you mainly interact with your mates on social media and it's been taken away. But it's going to be a great help to parents of kids who are 6 or 7 and haven't got onto social media yet. It's that same argument you've heard from some parents, some school heads, who want the government to ban smartphones in schools because then it's not their responsibility and they can say, sorry, kids, the government has said it. So that is where I think it'll be really interesting. So it's not going to be in weeks or even months, but give it a year to see if it's working. And look, it is easily something that you could see, just if it works, being followed in other countries, including here.
I think you're absolutely right. Now, it is It's flu season, and the NHS is warning that it's come earlier and hit harder than before. So part of the health service urging people to wear face coverings on public transport if you are ill yourself. This is not just a blanket, wear them. But if you have got flu, if you've got a cough or a cold, just spluttering everywhere, put on a mask.
The Chief Executive of NHS Providers, which represents NHS Trust, said we're facing a very nasty strain of flu that had hit earlier in the year than normal, and people who are coughing and sneezing should wear face coverings on public transport, just like during COVID.
Well, we talked to our correspondent, Molly Malone, about this.
NHS providers are saying that they're in unprecedented and uncharted territory, which is why they're saying we should be wearing a mask. They've said we need to go back into the habit that if you're coughing and sneezing, but you're not unwell enough to not go to work, wear a mask when you're in public spaces, including on public transport, to stop the chances of you giving your virus to somebody else. So that's from the Chief Executive of NHS Providers, which is the body that represents NHS Trust. We do have particularly high levels this year. 1,717 people were in flu beds in England last week, which is 50% higher than on the same point last year. And we're still actually, as they say, not at the kind of peak winter levels because we expect it to rise again in the run-up to Christmas. But Number 10 Downing Street saying is sort of long-standing advice, really. They've sort of said this is neither new nor an instruction, but simply something people can consider when trying to limit the spread of winter respiratory illnesses. The best defence against flu is the vaccine, which is why we're ramping up our vaccination efforts this winter with almost 17 million flu jabs already delivered. So people can take their flu jabs. I've not had mine. If you guys have gone to your pharmacy?
No.
So take it is the advice. Do it. Yeah, we know the people that it's available for, but yeah, they're saying take it. It is quite a serious matter this year.
Molly talking to us there a little earlier. Now, a member of the British forces has died in what's been described as a tragic accident while he was watching a weapons test in Ukraine. So they were away from the front line. The death is not believed to be the result of enemy fire.
It's the first time a serving soldier has died in Ukraine since Russia's invasion, but we don't yet know the name of the victim or their rank.
We do have a statement, though, from the Ministry of Defence. They've said it's with deep regret that we must announce that a member of the UK Armed Forces died in Ukraine this morning, Tuesday, the 9th of December. He was injured in a tragic accident while observing Ukrainian forces test a new defensive capability away from the front line.
The family has been notified and our thoughts are with them at this sad and difficult time, is how the statement finishes. Meanwhile, Donald Trump says his Ukrainian counterpart, President Zelensky, needs to accept the reality of the war against Russia as efforts continue to reach a peace deal.
So he was giving an interview to Politico, and the US president also went on to criticise pretty heavily European leaders for their handling of negotiations. He said that they talk too much and they're weak.
I think they're weak, but I also think that they want to be so politically correct. I think they don't know what to do. Europe doesn't know what to do. They don't know what to do on trade either. I mean, I look at a lot of the trade, situation that's going on over there. It's a little bit dangerous, but Europe, they want to be politically correct, and it makes them weak. That's what makes them weak.
The independent public spending watchdog has ruled the UK's current asylum processes are flawed and costing taxpayers more than they should. In the last year alone, it's estimated nearly £5 billion was spent on the asylum system.
So the National Audit Office also looked at some cases filed 3 years ago, and they found more than half still haven't been resolved. Our communities correspondent Lisa Holland spoke to one person in limbo.
Ibrahim is Palestinian. He came to the UK 2 years ago on a tourist visa, then claimed asylum. With his claim unresolved, Ibrahim says he wants to move on with his life to support his partner Yvonne and their daughter Alicia, who was born 5 weeks ago. He says he can't return to his home in the West Bank because of his political activism.
In your case, in the time you've been waiting to have your claim processed, you've met your partner and you've had a baby.
I don't think you need 2 years to process any asylum claim. I don't think there is any case that is complicated to that level. I'm not single anymore and I've got other responsibilities now.
The National Audit Office, which is the UK's independent public spending watchdog, has been looking at the processing and costs of people claiming asylum. It analysed a sample of 5,000 asylum claims lodged almost 3 years ago. Of those 5,000 claims, the NAO found 35% have so far been granted. 9% of the claimants have been removed from the UK. But the claims of more than half, 56%, remain unresolved.
Government has tended to take short-term reactive interventions to fix problems, but then these have led to other pressures forming elsewhere in the system and new backlogs forming. And that's led to wasted funds, that's led to poor outcomes for asylum seekers, and that's led to harm to the government's ability to meet its obligations to citizens.
Do you think the Home Office is up to the job of administering all of this?
I think the Home Office realises that outcomes aren't what they should be. We've seen a lot of positive efforts within the Home Office, but it's not systematic and it's still piecemeal.
The National Audit Office estimates in the last year the Home Office and Ministry of Justice spent nearly £5 billion on asylum, more than £2 billion of that on asylum hotels.
That is a slug. Is dead.
Before meeting his partner, Ibrahim says he stayed in 3 hotels funded by the Home Office, where he complained about the food and conditions.
The system is more than broken. It crossed that limit long time ago.
Ibrahim is one of more than 60,000 asylum cases currently awaiting an initial decision. But with delays in decision-making just part of the problem, the government has been scrambling to show it has the policies to tackle the issues raised, saying it's announced the most sweeping changes to the asylum system in a generation and is already making progress. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
So look, governments across Europe grappling with this migration crisis, and ministers, including the Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, are going to Strasbourg today, and they're talking, this is quite significant, about a potential shake-up of the European Convention of Human Rights. Let's try and find out what's going on. What is going on, Rob?
So basically, what the ministers from the 40 or so countries that are signed up to the Council of Europe and the European Convention are talking about is coming up with a political declaration, basically a document, bit of paper, that basically seeks to clarify how the European Convention on Human Rights is interpreted when it comes to primarily irregular and illegal migration. The reason why that's important is obviously because in the UK, but also in other countries across Europe as well, there's been political tension when that international treaty has basically got in the way of failed asylum seekers or foreign national offenders being removed from the country. So there's been a lot of discussion that dates back a couple of years now, actually, and it's interesting to see exactly who is having this discussion now. Because you go back to 2023, and people like Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman in the Tory party were, I think, some of the first that I can remember, mainly around Westminster, saying, look, the international frameworks that govern how people move around the world under asylum systems need to be basically reviewed and renewed for the modern world of mass migration and people being more mobile, basically. Now it's the Council of Europe, the people that run the ECHR, talking about this, And it's a former human rights barrister called Sir Keir Starmer who's talking about it as well.
Well, and by the way, those people were criticised, I think, at the time, being like, "Oh, you're anti-human rights," and that kind of is the middle ground on all of this has shifted. But my other question on this, Rob, is there's some parts of this where the Home Office has already said we can reinterpret this part. There's other much more complicated parts like rules around what would classify as torture if someone's sent back to a country where they could face that. I think the question I have is how quickly will this happen? I mean, I don't think any part of domestic government moves that quickly, but when you have to get agreement with justice departments across Europe, will this materialise big changes that then alter the numbers that countries like the UK are experiencing in small boats in any kind of sort of near time horizon?
I think there's sort of two elements to that question. I guess the first is the bit of the European Convention on Human Rights sort of interpretation that the UK believes it can do without necessarily having to talk to other countries. That's the stuff around the right to a family life. That's going to, I believe, mean more legislation and more guidance from the government on basically how courts in this country interpret that article. So, look, there's not necessarily a sort of international barrier on getting that done. And we have seen, and those around the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, brief that she is a woman in a hurry to get this done. So I wouldn't be surprised if that sort of stuff materialises maybe sooner than we expect. In terms of the political declaration that is going to come out of this process that's kicking off in Strasbourg today, I've been trying to get some clarity on the timeline of that. There's some reporting that they want it done by the spring of next year. So if that can be done, then it potentially means that guidance can be issued to courts in the UK pretty sharpish after that as well, because it basically provides the government in UK courts with cover, essentially, to tell them to interpret things a different way. If you've got a document coming from everyone in Strasbourg, which signed up to the Council of Europe, saying that it's OK to do that. So, look, I think I don't know quite why it's not someone from the Home Office that's there today. David Lammy's over there today. But we have seen, I think, whether it is on legal migration, illegal migration, or yesterday with the announcement of the chair of the grooming inquiry, which we weren't expecting initially until next year, that actually things seem to be hugely pretty quickly in this Home Office. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they surprise us on this.
I mean, if it happened by April, I think that would be hugely significant. It'd be very fast. Rob, great stuff. Thank you.
Coming up in just a few moments, we're going to be talking to the Chancellor, Strid. I'd be interested to get his view on if the UK should implement a social media ban for under-16s.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Hello, welcome back. Well, it's time to get the view of the opposition. Shadow Chancellor Strid is here with us. I'm really interested in your take on this ban that we've seen come into play today in Australia. Social media for under 16, so that's YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, the whole lot of it, they're not allowed to access it. Is that something that we should be considering here?
I think we should look at all options around social media, because I do think that they can have a really detrimental effect, particularly on younger people's mental health, and we have seen a very dramatic increase in mental health issues amongst younger people. We as a party, of course, already have a policy where we think that mobile phones should be kept out of schools, for example, shouldn't be interrupting that process of learning. But I think what Australia is doing is interesting and we should look at it closely.
I find it quite interesting hearing this from a Conservative, because you kind of, I guess you kind of instinctively think that you're going to be more kind of free market, less kind of regulation. But it does feel like on this, under Kevin Badenoch, you're actually a little bit more hardline than Labour, is that fair?
Well, it's up to other parties to decide where they are on these matters. But I do think, I mean, I've got 3 daughters, actually, and 2 of them sort of younger, and I've seen them go through living through social media and all of that stuff. And I think it is quite a high level of pressure on young people, you know, particularly girls, actually, you know, in terms of trying to conform to these kind of idealised versions of what they might be and so on, being connected to your friends 24/7, so that, you know, if an argument kicks off, it can carry on at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know. So I think there are extra stresses that it brings. So, look, I'm not advocating doing what the Australians have done, but at the same time, I do think this is interesting, and I think we should have a look at it.
Is it quite tough on parents? Because there'll be some people watching it who'd be like, look, it's parents' job, just don't let them on it.
Well, I think it's important, and there are parental controls on Facebook, but as we know with young people, they are past masters at getting around all these different things that you put in there to stop them doing things. And we, of course, in our way did, in different respects, the same thing back in the day when we were younger. But no, I think parents have a real responsibility. And parents need to really think about these issues, you know, and spend time with their children to sit down and talk about it and find out what they're up to and what they're doing and what they're being exposed to.
It's interesting you say about getting around things when you're younger. I can't imagine you as a rebellious teenager.
I don't think I was an incredible rebel, but I'm sure I must have, I don't know, gone and scrumped some apples from a farm or something at some point when I grew up in a village, you know, something terrible like that.
So today you are calling on the Chancellor to apologise for misleading the country over her budget. I mean, is that a bit strong?
No, I don't think it is. I think you've got a Chancellor who said when in opposition she wasn't going to be putting up taxes on working people, then broke the manifesto, then in the recent budget came back for more tax, saying that she wasn't going to do that, and once again on hard-working people, and took a choice to actually tax people in work in order to put up benefits to support and provide benefits for people who are out of work. And I don't think those are the right choices for her to have made.
I mean, I guess, you know, is there a situation in politics where we all need to be a bit less kind of Punch and Judy, a bit yes, yah-boo, and be like, look, when circumstances change, it is OK for you to do the right thing as a politician in your mind to try and react to that? Because she would say that the situation was worse than they realised when they were in opposition because they didn't see the full extent of the book. She will also say that there had been massive headwinds on the economy from, you know, Donald Trump, for example. She's saying there's been an impact from Brexit as well. It's OK to change your mind.
Well, I think what she's saying is it's anybody's fault but mine, which is what you're demonstrating. But look, as to yah-boo politics, our motion is very forensic. And as to misleading, one of the elements in our motion is what the Chancellor had to say on the 4th of November at that press conference that she organised when she misrepresented the state of the public finances. She had had pre-measures forecasts from the OBR a few days earlier, which clearly showed she was running a surplus against her fiscal targets, and yet led the public and the markets to believe that things were really dire. And that was going to be the reason why, at that point, she was suggesting or the Treasury was suggesting that income tax would have to rise, and that isn't the right thing to do. It's also a breach of confidentiality with the OBR, actually, because there should be confidentiality around those forecasts between the Treasury and the OBR, and she's breached that as well, and that's also in our motion. So I think we need to dig into these things in a bit of detail.
Do you think every Chancellor whose budget's gone down badly should apologise? Should, you know, Liz Truss, the next YouTube show?
Look, the final arbiter is the electorate. So I think if you have a manifesto, you stick to your manifesto, you manage the economy, and whatever happens, then the electorate make their decision. I think what we're looking at here is something very different, which is that there was a manifesto that was breached. There were promises that were made at the time of the previous budget that taxes wouldn't be going up on working people, and yet that has been reneged upon in order to fund more on the benefits bill. And that, I'm afraid, is a breach that we should be holding to account for.
And can I ask you about comments that Donald Trump has made about the London Mayor Sadiq Khan? He said that he's disgusting. He said that he was elected, in Donald Trump's words, because so many people have come in, i.e. because of immigration. Will you condemn the comments that have been made by Donald Trump?
I would not use those remarks and that terminology. I think as to the overarching point as to how successful Sadiq Khan has been as London Mayor, I would probably find more common ground, because I think if you look at things like crime, and I talk to businesses in London regularly, those sort of battling away on the high street with their shops and things, it has got out of hand. Look at housing, those kind of areas.
There's fair political criticism,
well. Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
But calling someone disgusting, I mean, that is...
Well, as I say, I would not use that language.
Why not?
Because I don't think it's an appropriate way to refer to the Mayor of London.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Good to have you on the programme. Mel Strid, the Shadow Chancellor. Coming up on the programme, we're going to be talking to some bereaved parents, Sarah and Jack Hawkins. We've been doing an awful lot about failings in maternity care in England after this report, but also more widely across the UK as well. And we are going to continue listening to people's stories.
Welcome back. A reminder of the headlines this morning. A new world for Australian teens to navigate as Australia bans children under the age of 16 from using social media. The law is designed to protect youngsters from potential mental health risks, cyberbullying and inappropriate content.
It's a warning to those with flu symptoms that they should wear a mask in public spaces to tackle what's been described as a tidal wave of flu. The chief executive of NHS Providers that represents NHS Trust says we're facing a very nasty strain that has come earlier in the year than expected.
The spending watchdog has found the UK's current asylum processes are flawed and wasting taxpayers' money. And that's as a Palestinian asylum seeker tells Sky News the process is more than broken after waiting 2 years for a decision. Now, we've all been talking this week about the crisis in maternity care. A report by Baroness Amos yesterday was utterly damning, with stories of women being ignored, filthy wards, and the most heartbreaking of all, avoidable baby deaths. Well, today, the state of services across the country will once again be laid bare when annual data is released from the Care Quality Commission later this morning.
Well, the state of maternity care in this country is something that we are not just going to do once on the show and then forget about. We're going to keep going. And after our reporting yesterday, we've been honestly overwhelmed by stories about the appalling care that you have suffered. So we just want to take a moment and reflect some of those stories. These are voiced by producers.
I was sick up to 30 to 36 times a day. I couldn't function, but I was never believed. I was told everybody gets sick in pregnancy. Even when I was laying on a toilet floor in A&E for 6 hours, unable to get up, they still didn't believe me.
I nearly lost my baby due to doctors not listening to me. I was sent home at 6 a.m. with contractions that were 3 minutes apart. The doctor was rude and discharged me. I drove home while in labour.
My midwife told me to stop making noise and refused to give me gas and air. No one came to check on me for over an hour, and I was on my own and terrified with my first baby.
Well, as Sophie was saying, many of you have been getting in touch with us, and please do continue to do so. Our email's mornings@sky.uk.
Yeah, we've been reading them, and honestly, it really is quite something. So thank you for sending them in. And one of the things that struck me after listening to the stories is just how bad we are, in particular, at dealing with baby loss, miscarriage, stillbirth, and the lack of humanity and compassion. So we wanted to bring you the story of one of our viewers. This is Sina. If you would do one thing today, watch what she has to say.
I had been on a ward post-procedure of removing the remains of our past baby, along with lots of new mums and their newborns, and that just felt absolutely horrifying to have to try and hide my tears. Similarly, the midwife coming up to my bedside to congratulate me on my pregnancy, even though I clearly passed the baby. And then there were the subsequent phone calls asking me why I hadn't showed up to scans in the following weeks, even though I'd miscarried in that same hospital, as well as numerous letters asking me why I'd missed appointments, again, from the same hospital. They didn't connect the dots. They didn't think that it could be an issue even. It should have been flagged and I should have been allowed time to grieve. And they didn't even offer any sort of bereavement condolences or a service or anything that might have helped me cope better.
We're now going to speak to Sarah and Jack Hawkins, who in 2016 received a payout of £2.3 million from Nottingham Hospital after the death of their baby daughter, Harriet. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. And we're so sorry for what you went through. And I know some time has passed, but it doesn't change how awful it was. Are you able, do you mind sharing with us a little bit about what tragically you went through?
Yeah, it was a full-term healthy pregnancy. The day after my due date, I started having contractions, and those contractions last for 6 days. Over those 6 days, I made 12 contacts with the hospital. I was repeatedly told I didn't meet the 3 in 10 contraction limit. I had 2 admissions. I remember the last phone call I made was absolutely horrific. I was crying on the phone, day 6 of contractions, and the midwife told me that you're not in established labour, your husband can't stay with you, don't come in. And I got off that phone call and I remember lying, just crying. And when I look back now, I was obviously starting to deliver. And then not long after I did start to deliver, Jack phoned the labour suite we were told to come in. The midwife who had spoken to me met me at the end of the corridor, shouted down, "Is it still hanging out of you?" She didn't help me, got to the desk. She said, "Oh, we were having bets that your husband was a doctor on the phone." I was then brought into a birth sanctuary suite. The midwife looked and said, "Oh, you're about to deliver the baby. I can see the baby's head. You can only have a water bath. You're too late for anything else." They struggled to get Harriet's heartbeat. They called for a doctor. The doctor said, "Well, your bladder's full. We need to drain your bladder." So they drained that, and then he said, "I'm sorry, your baby's dead," and he left the room. And then they left me for 9 hours trying to deliver a dead baby because of communication error.
I'm actually, I just don't know what to say listening to that, honestly. That is absolutely heartbreaking, and I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. Just to try and pick up, it feels like one of the things running throughout your entire story is people not listening to you as the mum who was giving birth. Is that what you felt?
Absolutely. And, you know, we were both senior clinicians at the Trust at the time, and my birth plan was do whatever you need to do to get my baby out alive. You know, I was low risk, and I got into a position where I was trying to be a clinician and give a clinical history, and even that wasn't enough. Honestly, I felt like a complete fraud. It was horrific.
Jack, you know, we've been sharing lots of stories this week. There's been many reviews in the years since you guys experienced your tragic and unfair experience. When you still hear of and see cases of vaguely similar, the care's just not good enough and the risks are so high of something like that happening again, how does it make you feel?
Well, first of all, thank you for covering this topic and for using the phrase "dead baby." I think that's important. Our baby wasn't born sleeping or lost to the angels. It's a clinical failure of care which resulted in the death of a completely normal child or baby. And those failures were all utterly avoidable. They wouldn't have happened to a member of the royal family. It's not like there was some clever bit of kit. It was just appalling care, backed by zero accountability. Nobody involved in that has been held to account in any way. What we hoped when we started campaigning, I guess, a few years after Harriet's death, because we were just dead inside ourselves, we were hoping that things would be different. Sadly, they aren't, and we are very concerned that the government have chosen to do a review of reviews rather than doing the thing that's absolutely required, which is a statutory public inquiry, just like happened in the post office, so that senior leaders, some of whom are still hanging around saying they know the answers to this maternity crisis, even though they've been around and about for decades, very familiar names. We need a judge to sit and say, but you knew about this and you didn't do anything. And then we can decide as a country if we think that's fair and right. And if not, what do we do about it? Because at the moment, we're going to do the same as we've always done. We're going to have a load of recommendations that don't change a thing, because what happens in Nottingham on a late Friday night will not be affected by the Secretary of State saying, I've got a new piece of paper.
I'm really struck by a lot of what you say. The fact that it's not a surprise. We've had multiple reviews, as you said, over many years, all saying the same thing, and it's still happening. But also about the lack of accountability in the NHS. I mean, one of the many, many emails we've had today is from one who works as an anaesthetist in the hospital, who said he's happy for us to share his story, but he doesn't want the name used because there's a hostility in the NHS, in his words, about people who speak out. Do you think there is a cultural problem in the NHS of, I guess, covering up?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we were subjected to a massive cover-up. And it's not just us. You know, there's 2,500 families in the review in Nottingham, and we were told we were a tragic, isolated case. And the issue with the NHS is it's a very small world. So toxic managers do move around, and then that culture spreads. And that's what needs to be addressed.
And the only way we can address that is in court, where senior leaders of the NHS are asked, you knew about this in 2013, what did you do? And, you know, I'd like to be in there saying, why is Harriet dead? Because you knew beforehand. And we do have, of course, that's something very good that we fought very hard for. We have a very serious police investigation going on in Nottingham. What we're troubled by with the current rapid review is that it's looking at hospitals that also need police reviews. But you won't get a police review unless you ask for one. Now, we've asked Baroness Amos to refer the hospitals and people to the police when she comes across evidence of potential crimes. I don't think that she took that seriously, nor has she done it. But the police in Oxford, in Leeds, in Leicester, in Sandwell, in Tameside, in East Sussex, and all the other, in virtually every hospital, need to be involved and looking to see whether the death of a child that was avoidable and caused by negligence or neglect is criminal. Because it would happen, you know, if it was a school, they would be there the same day a child died at school. But in hospital, you can have hundreds of dead children and they don't register it.
Sarah, just finally, if the Health Secretary, West Streeting, is watching, what is your message to him?
Oh, you know, I'm just so emotional at him. When he came to Nottingham families believed him and trusted him, and we honestly thought that he was going to do the right thing. And when your child dies, you don't often trust people, but I did, and I feel like I've let my daughter down. I feel I've exposed her to this rapid review. He's got to do the right thing. I don't get why babies can be killed, mothers can be killed, people are harmed in the NHS, and we get a repeat of a review. It's not fair.
It's been so powerful speaking to you both, and we are, you know, we're just so sorry about the death of Harriet. We really, really are. Thank you for coming on and for sharing your story.
So brave. Yeah. It was hard listening to them reflect.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So even harder for them. And again, our thanks to Sarah and Jack for coming on. Do please continue to get in touch with us on this story, which, as we've said, we're going to continue to cover mornings at sky.uk.
Now, multiple weather warnings are still in place this morning after Storm Bram lashed parts of the UK. 90-mile-an-hour winds have left thousands of homes without power, causing chaos for commuters. We can have a look now at some of the impact.
Well, residents along the riverside in York have been advised to take immediate action to protect themselves and their properties due to flooding from the River Ouse.
The storm led to this abandoned landing at Bristol Airport. I mean, you can see there those winds clearly shaking the plane. Would not want to be on that one. There were 91 flight cancellations at Dublin Airport, more disruption to flights and trains expected today.
And those in Scotland are warned to brace for more high winds today. Yellow warnings are in place until this evening for the Shetland Islands, north of Scotland, central Edinburgh and Glasgow, with gusts of up to 90 miles per hour expected in the northwest Highlands.
Well, in just a few moments, we're going to be talking about the staff at Harrods who were abused by the retailer's former boss, Mohammed Al-Fayed. They're going to have access to a new scheme for compensation. We're going to be talking to one of the survivors.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think is really unusual? Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Traveling is not just about the destination. It's also about how you get there. Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better. Thank you.
Hello, welcome back. Now, Harrods staff abused by the retailer's former boss, Mohammed Al-Fayed, will have access to a new redress scheme from today that lawyers hope will offer better access to compensation for victims. Now, Lindsay Mason survived abuse at the hands of Mohammed Al-Fayed. She joins us now. Can I just say, first of all, it is incredibly brave of you to be here on live TV talking in this way. And I just want to reflect that and respect that before we talk. And this interview is in your hands, right? So if you want to start, whatever, talk about what you feel comfortable with talking about. That's the first thing to say, right?
Thank you.
Just to give a bit of context, I mean, how old were you when you first started working for Mohammed Al-Fayed?
I was 20 years old. I worked there from 1989 to 1990 as a PA to Mohammed Fayed. And, I was there for just over 5 months, I think. It was a very traumatic time to remember in my life. But luckily, over more recent years, then Keaton Stone uncovered the traumas because he married to Sophia, and she had said about what happened at Harrods, and I worked there with her as well, so he started connecting the dots, and from those little dots, then the documentary came out, and then hundreds of other women have come forwards.
Yeah.
And in that, our case has gone very big, and so we're feeling much more assured now.
I mean, you completely understandably don't want to go over what happened, right? Because I get that. I totally get that, right? It is, I think, reflective of something that is incredibly traumatic in your life, and I just want to make that really, really clear.
Yes, each time we talk about it, we find it re-traumatizes us. Yeah. Because pulling the plaster off over these last 2 years has been incredibly painful for lots of us, and once this phase is over, hopefully we can really start to work properly on our healing and moving forwards from this trauma.
What was it like, can I ask, when you realised that, other people were talking out? Like, you talked there about connecting the dots.
Yes.
It must have been kind of horrific, but also maybe it was, I don't know, finding other people who had experienced similar things to you.
Yes, it's actually been an incredible journey because many of us sat in our silence. Mine is for 36 years coming up.
36 years of silence?
36 years of silence.
And what do you mean by that? Did you tell anybody?
I told bits and pieces to people, but I would have just sounded totally crazy if I'd come out with the whole thing, because who's going to believe a secretary, working for a chairman of, the corner store Harrods? So, no one would have believed us. And the things that happened over the years, I'd be thinking, hang on, how did that happen? How did no markers come up? How did all the protocols that should have been in place at Harrods, how did we slip through the gaps, Harrods sent many of us to see doctors and have medicals, which was part of the interview with private doctors. And, someone must have flagged that those results were going straight to the chairman. And, someone was paying the bills for these sort of examinations to take place. So I suppose when I realised what a massive enablement system that Harrods had running over so many decades, it took a real shock, and I must say the past 2 years has been a struggle, but I'm finding that it's starting to be a little bit cathartic, and the amazing people that I've met, I mean, the strength that we've drawn from each other has been amazing, and we kind of feel like we're stepping out of the dark now and, you know, into our power.
Yeah, because it does feel, that's a lovely way of putting it. You know, it feels like, you know, reading your own sort of story, that you kind of groomed in a way, like, you know, flown on private jets, you know, taken to Paris, and then obviously taken a very, very dark turn there. We often sort of talk about why is it that women always come out like in groups with these kind of historical, but, you know, past allegations. But I get that completely as a woman, right? Because, like you say, you have that fear of not being believed.
Well, people have tried to speak out in the past, and they all got shut down, and the control was so massive that if some people had gone to the police, then they would be spoken to by someone from Harrods, you know, telling them what to do or what to sign, what not to say. You know, we were monitored and followed and threatened for years. So to come out and speak about it was a huge leap of faith, but none of us really thought that there would be so many people. And so then when we understood that, it was actually took our breath away, that what we'd actually been in and got through and not been able to decompress from in our heads. Now, you know, lots of us have had lots of therapy, and it's helping, and we're understanding that and how it shaped our lives as well.
How has it shaped your life?
Well, it's caused, you know, problems for me. There's a lack of trust, you know, with lots of people, you know, including doctors, institutions. You know, some people didn't have such a good experience with the Met Police, but I am glad to say now that they are really pulling together and, you know, trying to pull all these enablers that turn their backs on us, you know, even if they turned away and ignored it, or the people that really enabled the other crimes to happen, you know, hopefully they will be held to account.
Can I ask why what's happening today matters? It's about a change to the compensation, that's right, isn't it?
Well, what's happened is that the KP Law have negotiated over a very long time for the 260 survivors that are signed with them a survivor-led and trauma-informed mechanisms that takes the power away from Harrods and puts it firmly in the hands of KP Law, so that, for instance, our confidential information, KP Law will have absolute control over who sees that at Harrods, because there's still some senior management. I mean, the MD, some of the legal team, they were there when many of these young ladies were getting abused. And so we can't give their papers over to them for everyone to see. So there's security there, and also there's safety in numbers, because we're going through as a global claim. So if they were going through individually, and say you were going through the Harrods redress scheme, which we're not, then Harrods could pick it apart and try and minimise their exposure.
Thank you very much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We've been talking about Harrods there, and I think it's important to say, of course, we have contacted Harrods this morning in the last hour. The retailer has given us this response. We've recently entered into a memorandum of understanding to explore a global settlement with KP Law, a legal firm representing some Harrods survivors. In keeping with our survivor-focused and trauma-informed approach, it's important that survivors have access to transparent information on redress routes available to them. And as such, we wish to clarify this and any form of redress for survivors, as with the Harrods redress stream, will follow the same established legal principles regarding the value of compensation awards and how these are assessed. Any suggestion otherwise is misleading for survivors of Harrods abuse. While it is at the discretion of the legal firm administrating a global settlement to choose how an offer is allocated between awards for survivors and legal fees, our hope is that every survivor receives 100% of the compensation, a commitment made by specialist abuse firms using the Harrods redress scheme.
Really important interview, that, and development in that story. It's gosh, it's been quite heavy at times today.
It's been emotional.
But again, a lot of important stuff, and more to come throughout the day on Sky News Today. Up next with Gareth Barlow.